The story starts with a noblewoman named Anastasia and her fiancé, the Crown Prince, breaking their engagement. It happened during a gathering of nobles. Anastasia, in front of the audience, expressed her difficulty in understanding her fiancé. The Crown Prince responded by publicly shaming her, calling her a thoughtless woman. To make matters worse, he compared her unfavorably to another girl, claiming that Amy, a girl with healing powers, was kinder and more understanding. Despite Anastasia's warning against making hasty decisions, the Crown Prince insisted that the country needed someone like Amy. He continued to insult Anastasia, supported by the nobles present. The Crown Prince even went on to reveal that he knew about the harassment Amy had faced, and insisted that someone like Anastasia would fail to become the mother of the country. As the nobles joined in insulting Anastasia, she couldn't take it anymore and threw her gloves at the Crown Prince. In another time and place, our main character woke up from sleep, claiming he remembered something important he had forgotten long ago. He started to explain the story carefully for everyone to understand from the beginning. The protagonist's name is Alan, and he lives in the royal capital of the kingdom of St. Laren-Rurden. He's just an ordinary 8-year-old boy, but something from his past life suddenly comes back to him. A game he played on his smartphone about a magical school life. It seems he must have been reincarnated into a villager in a game world. All Alan knows is that something really bad is about to happen. His mom and everyone else in the town are going to die soon. He decides to delve deeper into the dream he had earlier, which seems to hold the key to the rest of the game. In the game, Anastasia challenges Amy to a duel by throwing her gloves. The Crown Prince steps in to represent Amy when she has no one else to support her. Anastasia ends up losing the duel to the Crown Prince, and later, on her way to a local monastery, she gets attacked by bandits and disappears. But things are about to get even worse, according to Alan. The bandits who attacked Anastasia were sent by the Crown Prince, leading to a power imbalance and sparking a civil war that crumbles the kingdom's political stability. This chaos gives the East Empire an opportunity to attack, defeating the exhausted royal army with lightning speed. Alan knows this is a terrible situation, and he's determined not to let their stupid antics disrupt his life in any way. When he started shouting like that for no reason at all inside his room, naked, his mother came in and asked him what had happened. He explained that he had been having weird dreams. She told him he needed to have breakfast soon. Alan decided to protect his mother and made a promise to protect the city and all the people in it, in his own way. Even though he had memories of his previous life, he knew he was still his mother's son in this life. He knew he wouldn't run away easily, so he would continue protecting his people. He realized he needed to change the situation. While having breakfast with his mother, he thought about Crown Prince Karl Heinz, who was currently 8 years old like him, and had announced his engagement with Anastasia, who was also 8 years old. It made him realize he had 8 more years until the engagement and the judgment would occur. One might have wondered why Alan knew so much about this game's story. It turns out he had a bet with his sister to beat the game and couldn't refuse her challenge. As he strolled down the street brainstorming ways to save Anastasia, he noticed a carriage approaching and people gossiping about her. As the carriage passed by, their eyes met and Alan considered changing the course of the game's narrative. In his quest for ideas, he decided to follow the game's plot closely, realizing he had the power to turn things upside down. However, he hesitated because he didn't want Anastasia to die. Despite her appearing villainous in a normal setting, Alan believed she was a decent person. Anastasia's discussions about the country's politics and taxes made him understand her dedication to the nation, and he learned she was forced to leave in the end, a troubling thought. While lost in these reflections, he accidentally bumped into some melons owned by a woman named Monica. Alan apologized and she praised him for his good behavior, and mentioned her concerns about the guild's focus on alcohol. Monica worked at the pub connected to the Adventurers Guild headquarters. Despite feeling dragged around by her, Alan remembered he had forgotten something important. He asked for Monica's help for some reason. Later, Alan entered the guild with his mother. Rowdy-looking men questioned their presence. Assuming the first step of his plan had begun, Alan prepared for the unfolding course of his actions. Everyone, including his mother, found it hard to grasp what he wanted initially. Alan expressed his desire to clear the mud from the ditch. The man who initially seemed intimidating started smiling upon hearing him out. Subsequently, the man began to act kindly and suggested that Alan join the guild. He instructed his associates to hand over the necessary documents to be filled with the required details. Upon receiving the guild card, Alan was instructed to put a drop of his own blood on it. They assured him it would only be a small prick on the finger. As soon as Alan finished adding his blood to the card, it lit up. The man confirmed that the registration process was complete. Just as Alan finished registering with the guild, Monica suddenly appeared, jumping on him and playfully tossing melons onto his back. She wished him good luck, mentioning that his mother must be proud to have a son like him. Witnessing this, his mother became emotional and through tears expressed her hope that he would be okay, urging him to create his own luck. This entire experience left Alan with a sense of determination. He felt like he could change the course of the story, ultimately saving his mother and the entire town. He was aware that achieving this goal would require significant effort on his part, so he thought about going to check it out more to be sure if this was really the world from the game. He knew he'd need a lot of money to make his dream come true in the end. The main thing he had to do was beat the Crown Prince as a duel representative, which was a big step forward. He knew he would be enrolling in the Royal Academy for that in 7 years, so he needed money for all of that. Since he and his mom were already poor, he knew he would have to keep working hard. He thought about doing whatever work was necessary to make money quickly. He also knew about a secret scroll in the game that could be found 8 years from now. It was where Amy and the others would escape the Imperial Guards through the sewer and find the scroll in a forgotten room. Even though he knew he was in a game world, the sewer smell felt real to him. He found the compartment where the stuff was supposed to be, but the room didn't have any traps. He struggled to reach it for a while, but eventually managed to grab the scroll. When he revealed the scroll, it lit up on its own just like in the game and gave him a concealment skill. When he swiped the guild card, he felt like it was the perfect chance that he was in a game world. When the others started going into the sewer, Alan arrived just in time, admitting he had been lost for a while. He was determined to do whatever it took to make things better this time. After finishing the work, people predicted his mother would be upset at his dirty appearance. They decided to race to the tent, with the last one having to fetch water. Upon reaching the tent, they discovered Monica inside, naked. Everyone stared for a while and then rushed out, but Monica grabbed Alan's hand, insisting his mother would scold him for being dirty. Everyone outside heard a scream from Alan. After Alan came out of the tent and the men noticed Alan's butt shining as if polished, they decided to put on clothes for Alan. Back at home, Alan was excited about trying out the new skill, suddenly appeared behind his mother. He felt successful in making it happen. Later, he placed the earnings on the table and his mother advised him to take it easy. She stressed the importance of focusing on school. Alan realized he could learn 3 times a week for free in this world. He knew he had to work hard to enter school and change the future of the town and his mother. He thought about what he needed next, which was the appraisal skill. It seemed like a crucial skill to change the entire situation. However, the place where the scroll was hidden was quite different from the smelly sewer. He realized he might be risking his life for it after checking on the horn rabbits in the wild. Deciding to use his concealment skill, he moved through the path more easily than before. He pondered searching for the ruins immediately. Feeling the need to return home before nightfall, he kept moving around the map, exploring different directions from the larger town. Thanks to his concealment skill, even as a villager, he could roam around the town as if he had a free pass, feeling like some kind of diplomat within the town. On the 3rd day of his exploration, he witnessed rabbits fight. The 4th day left him with a nasty cold, causing concern among his guildmates and mother. Finally, on the 5th day, he reached the ruins, feeling the payoff for his hard work was near. However, just as he thought he was close to his goal, he noticed approaching monsters. Seeking refuge under broken rubble, he faced a dilemma. Feeling trapped, he pondered how to use his current situation to his advantage. Surprised by the sudden appearance of goblins, he realized his concealment skill was crucial for survival. Worried it might wear off soon, he knew more goblins would jeopardize his chance at acquiring the skill scroll. As the monsters multiplied, he considered calming his nerves and questioned why the circumstances had changed. Taking deep breaths, he resolved not to return without finding the scroll. Believing in himself and the cheat skill from the Otomy game, he boldly approached the monsters, crossing them out to enter the ruins alone and explore the basement on his own. As he entered, he noticed the floors illuminated by the glowing moss. Unable to use a torch, he was fortunate to have another light source to guide him through the cavern. Upon exploring further, he found the place surprisingly pleasant. Hoping to avoid encountering monsters like goblins, he decided to search for the room containing the scroll. Despite spotting a lot of treasure, he only thought of coming across the scroll. While inspecting the room on his own, he noticed a goblin arriving and stacking coins to create a makeshift treasure. Examining the room closely, it seemed like a treasure room crafted by the goblins, an element not present in the original game. He speculated that someone had modified parts of the game. Soon the goblin sniffed the air, suspecting something amiss, but after an unsuccessful search, it ran away after getting scolded by another goblin. Alan, using the concealment skill, felt relieved when the goblins left. Convinced that his quest for the scroll triggered the script changes, he was most surprised to find the scroll hidden underground at the end of the room. He reflected on how fortunate it was that the goblins didn't notice it. After sneaking through the goblins like a stealthy rat, he miraculously returns home unscathed. Eager to develop his skills, he promptly activates the appraisal skill using his guild card. As he completes the process, a sense of progress washes over him, motivating him to work even harder. Soon, people in his town start recognizing his contributions and expressing gratitude for his societal efforts. Time passes, and upon his return to the guild, he notices everyone getting busy with various tasks. The guildmaster, Rudolph, announces a significant discovery. an ancient ruin northeast housing a goblin nest. There's talk of a potential subjugation mission. Reflecting on his past decision to secure the scroll, Alan feels a sense of accomplishment. However, a nagging thought creeps in. He wonders if they would have handled it differently had they known that Amy was the one who uncovered the scroll. Intrigued and uncertain, he contemplates what future challenges might unfold. When he asked him more about the situation, Rudolph let Alan know that he would have to join the drain cleaning soon enough. When Alan inquired about being on the team to subjugate the goblin, Rudolph explained that he had already stopped being an adventurer. He would only report on the situation. When Alan pointed out that he must be too skilled to leave the career, Rudolph ended up showing his leg, which was nothing but a prosthetic. Alan realized that the situation was grimmer than he had hoped. It turned out that Rudolph had been hit by an orc arrow in his knee, and now he had to use the fake leg as a replacement. It was quite expensive and made it difficult for him to work. Despite this, Rudolph looked forward to Alan's career, believing that he would soon be able to swing his sword. Rudolph expressed that he would continue to look forward to it. Some of his men gathered around him to check out the map, and Alan observed that even after retirement, Rudolph was still loved and respected by everyone, making him an exemplary adventurer. From there, Alan kept himself busy with cleaning the drains as usual. The next thing that crossed his mind was alchemy, necessary for achieving his next goal. When his mother came in and asked what he was about to do, Alan claimed that he would go outside to buy some stuff and be gone until evening. Seeing him dressed up, his mother assumed Alan was going on a date. It appeared that Alan needed more than 10 million cents in his grasp, even though he required 15 in total to buy it. He started wondering how he could manage to obtain something so pay-to-win by earning money. As he walked into the street, he noticed merchants selling things in the market. The idea struck him that he could use the appraisal skill he had acquired. Examining one of the items, he sensed its uniqueness and considered buying it. After researching more, the shopkeeper explained the item's story to him. Despite the shopkeeper assuming it was for his girlfriend, Alan paid with his guild card to make the purchase more trustworthy. Thinking ahead, he planned to sell it to another adventurer or merchant, even if it meant selling it for half of the appraised price. Confident he would still turn a profit, his goal was to reach 15 million cents. Excitedly, he showed the item to Rudolph. After a thorough examination, Rudolph suggested consulting an expert for a better opinion. The expert explained that the earring was robust and fire-resistant gloves would enhance its value significantly. Despite Rudolph advising Alan to let the guild handle the sale, Alan, determined to do more, insisted on taking charge. Rudolph agreed but warned him of potential troubles if he sold it independently. Leaving the item in the hands of the expert, Rudolph shifted the focus to sword training. During their sessions, Rudolph consistently advised on sword techniques, emphasizing that the strength didn't lie in the sword itself, but in knowing how to use it effectively. As Rudolph continued reminding him not to neglect training, Alan realized that it was not enough to rely on the cheat skills he got. Rudolph instructed Alan like a Spartan trainer and made him run around 100 laps and swing his sword 100 times. By the end of the day, Alan fell to the ground due to fatigue, and Rudolph assumed that he could defeat a one-horned rabbit already. Days passed by, training, buying items while appraising, and cleaning the ditches. Alan finally gained 15 million cents and he is now 11 years old. After eating breakfast, his mother wondered where he was going. He claimed he was going to the market. His mother started giggling at seeing his son all grown up. She reminded him not to stay out late since the next day would be something important. Alan went out and reflected on the past year of hard work paying off. Finding himself in a scary place, Alan decided to use his concealment skill to stay safe from the eerie eyes around him. After disarming his concealment, he stood in front of a store and used his appraisal skill to learn the password. When he uttered the password, the door opened as if by magic. Inside, a hooded person asked him what he was looking for, and Alan said he was searching for the scroll of alchemy. The man praised his taste and offered it for 14 million, even throwing in some magic stones for free. However, when Alan used his appraisal magic on the scroll and complained that it was only an ordinary scroll, the man realized Alan wasn't someone to scam and complimented his keen eye for details. Upon seeing the real scroll on the table, Alan asked if he could use it and offered to pay with his guild card. After the transaction, Alan left, deciding it might be best to avoid the place in the future. 2 years of hard work paid off, and Alan had a satisfying ending to his quest. Returning home, his mother noticed he was late and advised him to go to sleep early for an important day ahead. The next day was his graduation exam, and he knew he could rely on his memories from his past life to succeed, despite the lack of importance given to elementary and middle school education in the country. The teacher called Alan, informing him that he was now 11 years old and needed to take an exam. She invited him for a walk, and in a hidden room, she initiated the hourglass. Alan recognized that the first part involved memorization. As he neared completion, the only challenging part seemed to be geography. Upon finishing the exam, the teacher was surprised to find that only an under of hour had passed. Despite her insistence on reviewing the answers, Alan felt confident and wanted to leave. When the results were published, the teacher excitedly ran to him, revealing that he had not only passed but achieved a perfect score in every subject. She thought skipping a grade at the age of 11 was impressive and believed it would be a strong recommendation for high school admission. Expressing his desire to attend high school, Alan learned it was 4 years away. Despite the wait, he decided to be patient. The teacher promised to submit a recommendation and wondered how she would contact him post-graduation. Alan suggested informing the Adventurers Guild since his mother is usually away for work. Returning home, he celebrated with his mother. She gifted him a dismantling knife, an item he had always wanted. Overwhelmed by the realization that his mother spent a significant portion of her income on the gift, he cried. His mother comforted him, expressing her only wish for his happiness. He vowed to save money for high school, and although his mother felt sorry for not managing it herself, he assured her he would protect her without faltering. Not long after, he received a notification that the age restriction no longer applied to him, allowing him to take the entrance exam. Simultaneously, Alan became an F-rank adventurer. At this moment, he felt like there would be more than 3 years until he reached an important stage in the game. Contemplating the harsh fate ahead, he considered putting an end to it all. Monica burst in, shouting congratulations for his achievement at such a young age, but Alan dodged her. The pub patrons joined in, praising his improvement each day. Rudolph entered and patted him on the head, making him realize his value to them. Rudolph explained that even without the protection of a swordsman or warrior, Alan would be fine. This protection worked like a divine blessing, boosting proficiency and allowing special abilities. Amy had the divine protection of healing, and the Crown Prince had protection for fire and hero skills, making him the true protagonist-class hero. Despite being currently crippled, Old Man Rudolph had the protection of a swordsman, showcasing his immense talent in swordsmanship. Alan, a commoner with no special protection, considered it normal. For now, he knew he needed Rudolph's guidance to improve and eventually reach E-rank status. Rudolph said it would take a while because he had been cleaning ditches. Now he had to gather herbs and hunt horn rabbits. He warned Alan to be careful since they hadn't been outside of town before. Alan planned to start the quest the next day. Alan finished the quest in 2 days. Knowing about the game made it easier, but the horn rabbits were still tough to deal with. Using the knife from his mother, Alan leveled up their skills. He set his sights on the Valley of the Flying Dragon, seeking wind magic from the Book of the Wind God. He needed to improve before the high school entry exam, which he saw as the start of their adventure. In another time and place, Amy faced a fierce monster with Carl. The dragon creature accused her of killing her husband despite Amy's protests. The monster attacked relentlessly, and Amy realized things weren't getting better. She unleashed an offensive barrier to finish the monster off, but its child suddenly attacked behind her. Carl saved her, and despite Amy's regret, he consoled her, saying it had to be done. That's how Alan remembered the game event. The magical fantasy and thrill of school life kept replaying in Alan's mind. He reminded himself of the need for the Book of the Wind God. Remembering how they had been called robbers by the wyverns they killed while looting, he felt a sense of emptiness in Amy's tears. Feeling the world becoming dangerous, Alan resolved to be cautious on his way to the Valley of the Flying Dragon for the book. He believed he had prepared well in Friesen Village, the closest to the valley, so he could trek there in a day. Aware of ferocious demons in the mountains, he wanted to avoid unnecessary fights. Using his concealment skill, he aimed to steer clear of danger and make it back safely. Just as he felt the need to have prepared better for climbing the mountain, he noticed the wyvern flying above his head. As he surveyed the landscape, the Valley of the Flying Dragon looked amazing. The main difference between dragons and wyverns was that dragons could breathe fire and roar, while wyverns couldn't. This made wyverns weaker than dragons. Despite these thoughts, he knew it wasn't the time to dwell on them. Instead, he focused on building a camp before sunset. Using his alchemy magic, a skill centered around crafting abilities, he quickly set up the camp. He considered what more he could do with his magic, such as crafting and strengthening weapons, armor, and potions. With magic stones, he discovered he could even maximize the ability to build wagons, huge forts, and even an item against the last boss, which turned out to be a darkness-corrupted Anastasia. This item would temporarily weaken Anastasia. After spending too much money and 3 years of hard work on his skills, he wondered if it would be enough. After a night in his camp, he restored the place to its original form in the morning. He then decided to visit the Temple of the Wind. Despite the constant attacks from the wyvern creatures draining the strength of anyone who approached, Alan confidently navigated the area using his concealment skill. When he arrived at the Temple of the Wind, he noticed a black wyvern lord lying in the middle. As he checked to see if it was asleep, contemplating sneaking in to collect a book, the spirit of the wind god called him out. He felt paralyzed and was told by the wind god that he had to ask a favor. Despite trying to use his concealment skill, it didn't work. The wind god showed him a scroll preventing him from leaving, clarifying that he wasn't there to harm him. As he pondered the situation, the man introduced himself as the god of the wind. This introduction made Alan feel doubtful. While waiting for the wind god's favor, he observed the god handling the wyvern, named Jerome, throwing it around and asking it to wake up. When the wyvern finally woke up, the wind god claimed that Alan would be helping them. Jerome introduced himself as a wyvern lord. When asked to shake hands with Alan, Jerome hesitated and hid behind the wind god, who assured him it would be fine. The wind god then revealed that Jerome had fallen in love with another of his kind named Melissa, possessing traits of a sky dragon. Alan was not privy to the full details, but the wind god insisted that Alan needed to make their love story come true. If successful, divine protection would be granted and the scroll would be handed over as the wind god took responsibility for it. Alan realized it was impossible to take the book from the wind god. Alan felt that he would need to keep listening to the wind god, who promised to give rewards. The wind god didn't know much about lizard romance, so he left everything to Alan and disappeared. Alan then wondered about Melissa's appearance. From a distance, they observed the female wyvern, and Jerome kept hiding his face out of shyness. When Alan noticed a ribbon around Melissa's tail, he realized she must have been the boss of a mission defeated by Amy and the Crown Prince. He understood the potential consequences if he hadn't arrived in time. As Alan and Jerome talked, he noticed Jerome's shyness and lack of knowledge about Melissa. Frustrated, Alan called Jerome a stranger lurking around her. Alan suggested that Jerome should become friends with Melissa first. Approaching her, Melissa demanded to know who he was, expressing that she had never seen him before. However, Jerome felt she treated him like trash and flew away. Realizing their initial attempt had failed, Alan decided Jerome needed to find a gift for Melissa. Alan asked the wind god for Melissa's current location, and they waited for Jerome. The wind god was confident that Jerome, being a great hunter, would make significant progress. However, when Jerome descended with a huge worm in his mouth, Melissa got scared and flew away. Alan thought of pursuing Melissa with fashion, and Jerome flew away. However, it was also a failure. The wind god speculated that Alan might have another strategy. Alan believed that dressing well was more important than trying to look fashionable. He considered gentlemanly clothing from his past life, including a suit and necktie. He decided to create them using alchemy with magic stones from goblins. Alan ended up making a huge tie for Jerome, boosting his confidence. After using his abilities, Alan got tired, but Jerome was happy with the new attire. The wind god then opened a window to show Melissa. They suddenly heard a scream and Jerome's eyes widened as he discovered Melissa was in danger, surrounded by many dragons. While in panic, Jerome flew away to save his dear Melissa. When they reached Melissa, Jerome fought the surrounding wyverns to protect her. Jerome, surprisingly emotional, insisted they stay away from Melissa, shocking her. Despite dragons picking fights with Jerome, he pleaded with Melissa to run for her safety. However, as she attempted to escape, one of the dragons tried to catch up to her, but Jerome caught its tail and slammed the wyvern to the ground. Realizing Melissa was in imminent danger, Jerome fought against all odds to protect her. Meanwhile, the wind god and Alan had a conversation with Melissa. Melissa found the wind god creepy, and Alan felt on the verge of losing their composure. As the dragons chased them, Alan noticed the wind god realizing the danger. Swiftly, the wind god whisked them away, allowing them to talk freely. Melissa, unaware of the situation, listened as Alan explained they were friends of Jerome and were there to help. As Jerome bravely fought off the dragons, Melissa fell silent. When Jerome struggled and Melissa rushed to help, he finally woke up. Surprised, Melissa found herself under him, joking about his weight. Yet, as Jerome tried to leave, Melissa held onto his tail, grateful for his rescue and expressing her admiration with a kiss. Alan, satisfied with bringing them together, received a blessing from the wind god. The god announced a future gift for Jerome and Melissa after their marriage, leaving Jerome flustered. Melissa wondered if he was ready for such responsibility. The god disappeared, leaving Alan with a sense of weirdness. Reflecting on the wind god's book, Alan considered Amy's absence. Realizing Amy wouldn't receive divine protection when she visited in 4 years, he pondered the unfolding scenario. As Alan delved into his thoughts, Jerome started thanking Alan. Alan insisted it was unnecessary, stating there was no need for any gratitude. In response, Alan suggested that avoiding this place for the next 4 summers would be enough as a form of thanks due to potential break-ins. Melissa entered the scene, expressing her gratitude for a precious ornament made for Jerome. Alan noticed their growing camaraderie, with the use of nicknames feeling sweet. Melissa assured they'd be available whenever needed as an act of gratitude. Alan agreed and prepared to bid farewell. As Jerome teetered on the brink of tears, Melissa reminded him to be strong and asserted the need to find their own place quickly. Jerome professed his thanks for Alan and flew away. Alan shifted focus, completing the mission of aiding the wind god and gaining divine protection. Realizing an unfinished task in Friesen Village, Alan needed to secure high-speed transportation by building a glider. Though learning wind magic wasn't part of the initial plan, Alan, a former aeronautical engineer, considered it useful for their current situation. Determined to build a motor glider, he prepared for future missions. Upon reaching the vast field in the village, he cleaned the runway for the glider with wind magic. Although the spell chanting felt awkward, Alan recognized his skills surpassed typical low-level adventurers, elevating him to a D-ranked magic power. He then thanked the creepy-looking wind god for the useful magic. Alan then started preparing the glider. He started working through the building map and used all the materials gathered over time, applying alchemy to them. After smelting the materials together, the glider was ready. The runaway seemed perfect, so he decided to begin test running with it. He even infused some magic into the right handle and activated the Wyvern's magic stone. Upon accelerating, he felt an absurd amount of output, compelling him to keep going up. As he soared through the glider, Alan targeted a ruin to reach his desired location. However, he realized he forgot to clean the road where he built the glider. Deciding to think about it later, he focused on reaching his destination. Since he hadn't flown since his university days in his previous life, he couldn't contain his excitement. Meanwhile, Anastasia sat with her friend Margaret and the maids. She noticed a strange bird-like object in the sky, assuming it might be one of the wyverns going in the wrong direction. They decided to report it as soon as possible. On the other hand, Alan realized that he could already see the royal capital from his position. It felt like he had soared through the skies, saving a lot of time compared to taking a carriage. However, as he contemplated landing, he wondered if there was enough space in the crowded royal capital streets. Without a parachute, he couldn't jump off, so he spotted a large lake while rushing through the skies. Despite the risk, he decided to land in the middle of the lake, planning to play it like a human raven. Targeting the lake, he glided to the water's edge to avoid stalling. He believed that deaccelerating would result in a better water landing. Just as he was about to land, Alan initiated magic reverse thrust, successfully entering the water with reduced impact. Although he felt careless, he was relieved to find that most of his belongings were safe. However, he noticed that his improvised technological alchemy started burning, revealing the hidden secret behind alchemy. Despite the successful flight, Alan regretted losing two precious wyvern magic stones, the wyvern's femur, and even the wings in one disastrous flight. When he finally met Rudolph, he greeted Alan and noticed that he had been dripping water all over the place, which made him rather curious about his situation. Just as he began to talk about Alan leaving his mother, Monica came in to scold the old man, saying that Rudolph must have been the one to pour a bucket full of water on Alan's head. However, Alan cleared the situation and she began to worry about him catching a cold. She started taking him with her to have a bath together, assuming that it had been a long time since they had bathed together. Instead of thinking much about the situation, Alan began taking the magical shower, which was considered rather expensive in this world. He took the change of clothes that he had kept in the guild for himself. Even though he had finally finished the first expedition of his life, he felt like he needed to reflect on a lot of things in his life right now. The more he remembered about his previous life, the more he felt like he had failed to be an engineer in his life. The more he thought about the glider accident, the more he felt like he had had a childhood like this in his previous life as well. He felt like even after growing up in his body, he kept on acting like a child who kept on making mistakes over and over again in his life. The more he procrastinated while sitting in front of the lake, Alan began to wonder what kind of modifications he could do on the glider the next time, so he would be able to minimize the danger on his own. After processing the thoughts for a while, he felt like he wanted to build an airplane, which was called a VTOL airplane. This brought him in front of the cheat item with the name Scroll of Multiple Chanting, so he would be able to make mistakes and continue to experiment on them at once. But all he remembered was that the scroll was in a difficult place. Even so, he hoped that he would manage to make it happen in any way. So he thought of progressing on his own by smelting items at once, even though he was not confident about his placement. He felt like the new modification would help him out in various ways, and it seemed to be a plane customized especially for the mission that he had in front of him to reach the destination. Alan once rode the glider again to soar through the skies. As he glided, he pondered two crucial things: the accuracy of the blueprints and the magical power needed to complete the extensive workload. Simultaneously, he considered the importance of cutting costs, emphasizing thrift. Eventually, he reached his destination while riding his newly made airplane, the Tower of the Sage. While circling the tower with his airplane, he reminded himself of the need to reach the top floor. He repeated the process of ascending and turning, recognizing that the stratus clouds extended up to approximately 2,000 meters above the ground. Reaching this altitude, he faced no interference from inside the tower. Realizing he was reaching a high altitude, he focused on his goal. He activated the wind magic engine, took it apart, and left his seat on the plane while flying through the air. He then channeled his mana and gathered it in his hands. He targeted the tower floor, opened the parachute, and safely landed on the target. Without any issues, he made it to the tower's highest floor. Despite his fear of heights, he entered his parachute into a storage state, grabbed onto the wiring, and successfully climbed the tower. Feeling accomplished, he stood in front of the treasure he had been seeking, considering the glider missile operation a huge success. After a brief rest, he approached the coveted item, a scroll, with a sense of immediate acquisition. He didn't want to waste time as the skill was already secured. Alan felt he was close to his final destination, only needing to decide on another skill. However, the realization that he had to leave this high position made him anxious. Gathering the best possible skill for now, he prepared to move forward. Once there was a wise sage who used to help people all over the world. He didn't need to chant any magic spells to use his powers. However, one day, while on his way to the village of elves to share potion ingredients, the sage tragically perished. His soul became trapped within a magical scroll. This scroll was the final item needed by Alan, but to find it, he had to navigate a tricky path hidden in the Forest of Illusion, where the elves dwelled secretly. Even though Alan knew they would eventually have to go there, they also knew they had no immediate business in the elven village. The events involving the village were set to happen much later, so for now, all they could do was focus on their mission. He believed that his aircraft invention would be the highlight of his life, and he needed to make it to Rinzia village soon, following directions from the guild association. At the same time, he had many problems with the map from the guild. It was outdated and he lost his way in the sky before reaching the Forest of Illusion. This was bad given the strong demons and monsters in the area. He knew there was a time limit for the concealment, which wouldn't help in this situation. Upon reaching the village, he decided to camp as the sun set. He noticed a drop-off point outside the village, making it easier for him to land his plane. Using the vertical engine and activating altitude control engines on both wings, he made a comfortable descent to avoid risks. After using up his magic abilities, he grew tired. Upon landing, he saw elves targeting him with bows and arrows, catching him off guard. When brought to the village leader, they questioned if he was human. Despite claiming to intend reaching a human village, he ended up in the protected elven village, creating hostility. The village head was shocked, as their magic protection should have prevented humans from entering. Alan explained that he chose to enter using the skies. They realized he was referring to the vehicle he used, but some doubted his honesty as they couldn't sense magic in him. When the queen confronted him, he felt the need to keep his abilities hidden. All he knew was that the non-human race didn't like humans. However, when he mentioned having the divine blessings of the wind god, they felt more at ease. Despite not fully understanding the situation, the queen insisted he help save their village, treating him better. She disclosed their struggle with an evil spirit in the Forest of Illusion, which was nearing the village. Alan, unfamiliar with the events, got involved as the queen revealed the spirit's pursuit of them and other spirits. He found it hard to believe, but sensed their desperation for help. Due to strained relations between humans and elves, they hesitated to seek aid from other races. However, now with Alan present, the queen kneeled before him, expecting him to be their protector. Just then, the village princess, known from the game, disagreed vehemently, suggesting extermination as a better option. The queen advised her daughter Sherry to leave the room. Before long, the queen's companions rushed in, informing that an evil spirit had reappeared. Sherry, instead of waiting for her mother's advice, immediately started running towards the commotion. Realizing the urgency, Alan understood he needed to take action. As the guards flooded the area, Alan observed that the evil spirit seemed to be acting independently. The more he scrutinized it, the more he sensed it might be a wizard. Curious, he bombarded the queen with questions about the mysterious person. In this heightened state, Alan felt more attuned to the situation than the elves. However, his focus shifted when he noticed a suspicious individual. The queen, recognizing his concern, allowed him to examine the scene more closely, revealing the presence of the troublesome spirit. Amidst the chaos, Sherry declared her intention to eliminate the evil with her bow and arrows. Alan realized she was misunderstanding the situation. As the arrow struck the person, it simply bounced off, deepening the mystery. Alan questioned the person's allegiance, wondering who they were working against among the elves. The queen, sensing the complexity of the situation, requested Alan's assistance in this troublesome scenario. Alan started to wonder about the mysterious person who suddenly posed a threat to the village. As they delved into the identity of this surprising figure, Alan considered convincing the individual, initially labeling him as a wizard. However, the man insisted that he was a middle-aged virgin, surprising Alan. After some conversation, Alan, still curious, began to inquire further about the man's virgin status. The man explained that his parents had imposed it on him, revealing his name as Loringas. As Alan thought about this middle-aged man pursuing a young girl, he became increasingly uneasy, feeling like a significant crime was being committed. Alan questioned the man about his actions, and in response, the man expressed a desire to meet the spirit from the village of the elves. He claimed that the spirit had lived for thousands of years but remained in the form of a little girl, which was considered as a legal loli. The situation made the elves uneasy, suspecting the presence of an evil spirit. They couldn't see the man and started acknowledging and encouraging him to handle the situation. The elves had high expectations, believing Alan could bring about a positive change. Alan began telling the wizard to leave, accusing him of being a pedophile. The wizard defended himself, insisting that he was only admiring beauty without any harmful intent. As Alan thought more about it, he believed the wizard's actions were not as bad as he initially thought. However, when Alan pointed out that the wizard was scaring away a spirit, the wizard finally acknowledged his wrongdoing. Feeling remorseful, the wizard dropped to the ground, admitting that scaring away the spirits was not gentlemanly. Alan insisted the wizard should leave, and the wizard, confused, mentioned going to the village of elves, not realizing he was already there. Surprised by this information, Loringas tried to ran toward the queen, but Alan stopped him since he looked a lump of evil thoughts to the eyes of the elves. During their conversation, the wizard started talking about an elixir, making Alan realize it was likely the main reason for his presence. Alan then directed him towards the queen of the elves. The middle-aged wizard then listed the things he needed from the elves to create an elixir. When Alan shared this information with the queen, she thought it could be managed and instructed her people to gather the required items for the man's potion making. After inspecting the items, the man felt that he finally had everything he needed and expressed gratitude to Alan for the initial help. As soon as the man left, cheers erupted from everyone, including the queen, who perceived him as someone superior. Even Sherry, captivated by him, assumed he must be beneficial for the elves. The villagers kept urging him to take a break in their village, and Alan spent time in the hot spring within the elven village. As he sat alone in the spring, he reflected on the situation and felt like he might have done something wrong during the entire event. An elven individual then approached, suggesting that he should watch his back, making Alan uneasy about the man's intentions from the start. After he finished resting in the spring, he started hearing a strange noise in the middle of the village. The queen arrived, announcing that the spirit of light had been born. A spirit began playing with a little kid, and the queen mentioned that it had been 800 years since the last spirit of light was born in the human world. Although Alan felt a connection to something that happened in a game he played before, he was certain that Amy's birth had nothing to do with this event. As the spirit approached, everyone pointed at Alan, and the spirit thanked him, claiming he had saved her life the day before. She explained that he was the reason she could create the elixir, which turned him into a spirit. Confused, Alan wondered if the spirit was the person he was thinking of based on his tone. The spirit mentioned that he had transformed into a lowly to understand them better. Alan, feeling like he was losing his mind, learned that the spirit was no longer Loringas. She had made a contract with Millie, the elven kid, and her name was now named Lou. After learning the news, the queen became quite happy. As Alan reflected on what had happened with Amy, he felt on the verge of losing control. He convinced himself that it wasn't his problem at all. At that moment, Lou approached him with a scroll. When he inquired about it, she explained that it was a chantless scroll she had created. Lou wanted him to have it as a token of gratitude for what he had done for her in this life. She shared that she had spent her entire life trying to become a lowly, and now, thanks to Alan, she had achieved it. Alan realized she was serious about it. As he contemplated the situation, he felt a sense of chaos and mixed emotions getting something from a pervert. Expressing his gratitude to everyone in the village for their support, Alan found Sherry repeatedly knocking on the glider to confirm if it really flew. Meanwhile, the queen decided to gift Alan an amulet crafted with the prayers of the elven villagers. It would serve as a symbol of their friendship and offer support as a token of appreciation for saving the village. When he was getting ready to fly, the queen told everyone to move aside. Sherry was amazed to see that he could actually fly. Alan assured them that he would come back to visit. When he finally said goodbye to everyone, Lou waved her hand at him. Alan thought about returning to his hometown after accomplishing the most important thing he had to do. Now that he completed phase 1 of his mission in life, he considered moving on to the next one. Alan believed he had everything he needed, and the only thing left was to improve his strength and raise his level. As he pondered how to enhance himself, Rudolph asked if Alan was thinking about his goblin-slaying debut. Alan was indeed contemplating a new beginning. Before he could give a definite answer, Monica unexpectedly appeared and quickly pulled him close, acting like a girlfriend. She told him not to worry his mother and never push himself too hard. She playfully slapped his back to divert his thoughts. That night, Alan then discussed the extermination mission with his mother, explaining that he would be away from home for a while due to dangerous requests. As he was cradled by his mother, thoughts of a future free from every problem filled his mind. He believed that when the time came, he would be able to protect his mother. Later, when Alan approached the familiar old shady shop to sell the honey he had received from the elven village, he felt it might be too expensive for someone like him to possess. Despite Alan's attempts to explain that he had secured it through a connection, the man insisted on bidding $2 million for the honey. Alan decided to accept the offer, but the man continued to ask for more. Alan believed he could manage, though it would take some time. When he requested a magic bag the size of the room, the shopkeeper burst into laughter, claiming such a thing didn't exist, not even in dreams. Despite the shopkeeper's incredulous words, Alan was certain such a bag existed in the world. Deciding to leave the shop for the time being, he envisioned successful expeditions in the future, driven by his own improvements, allowing him to make progress. He entered the village of Streusen and met the village chief, who explained they were struggling to find help. Alan decided to stay in the village, and the old man offered him free lodging, but he had to pay for his own food. Alan couldn't stop thinking about the goblins he was going to hunt. After pondering for a while, Alan came up with the idea of using an AK-47 Kalashnikov. He used concealment magic to explore the forest, suspecting there might be a labyrinth where goblins appeared. Prepared for a fight, he entered the forest and soon spotted a goblin. He shot at it from a distance, wondering if it was truly down. Approaching the fallen monster, he realized he had successfully finished it off with 3 chest shots, obtaining a magic stone. As Alan continued using the gun, the fight started to feel easier. It seemed like an illusion to him. By the end of the day, he had defeated 12 goblins, making him feel more capable and in control of the situation. After Alan made the payment, he thought about doing it again. One day, he considered leaving for the labyrinth. Even though he spent the week in the forest, he didn't encounter any goblins. This led him to decide to venture into the labyrinth. He knew that confronting and defeating goblins attacking villagers was a key event in the game, boosting one's level. However, the challenge was that labyrinths were guarded by formidable bosses. The true purpose of destroying the labyrinth remained a mystery to everyone. Alan began to question if it was really necessary to completely annihilate the labyrinth. To navigate the labyrinth, Alan used a magic lantern he purchased at the guild for 300,000 cents. This item could be illuminated by Mona without producing any heat or smoke. As Alan explored the labyrinth, he encountered 2 goblins. Feeling unable to hide effectively due to the lantern's light, he attracted more goblins. While using the lantern, Alan likened himself to a football fish, and the situation made him nauseous as memories of the labyrinth rushed back. Despite the challenges, he speedily navigated through the labyrinth and finally reached its lowest floor, the 5th floor. Here, the hall with the core was guarded by powerful bosses. Soon enough, he encountered the Goblin King. Considering the best approach, he decided to target the monster's minions first. Recognizing that dealing with the largest threat was crucial, he utilized his wind magic to make the minions disappear. Targeting the Goblin King, he started shooting at the massive monsters. The king experienced intense pain as he attacked, and the monster in response charged at him with a massive hammer. Despite Alan recalling his experiences from the video game, he realized he was still resilient. However, as his countermeasure weapons were depleted, he threw the last bomb at the monster. The explosion caused the monster to scream in agony, as if facing the touch of death. Seizing the opportunity when the monster uncovered its helmet to scratch its head, Alan used his powerful Kalashnikov to obliterate the monster's head. This confirmed to him once again that the strategies from the game were effective. Even after Alan blew the monster's head off, he saw the enormous body still shaking. Concerned, he readied the wind cutter in case the creature wasn't dead. As soon as the body stopped moving, he realized collecting the magic stones would be a big problem. Finally reaching the labyrinth's core, he knew destroying it would make everything disappear. However, touching the core will instantly return him to the entrance. Back at the guild, he shared his labyrinth experience, earning admiration from everyone. Despite the praise, cheating made him feel embarrassed. Monica, known for her ample bosom, came to welcome him, but Alan had already left. The guild took the goblin's magic stone to get a better price. Expecting recognition for defeating the dungeon, Alan anticipated gaining status and more money. He decided to buy a new home the next day, bringing him one step closer to the future he envisioned with his mother. Once Alan returned home, his mother reached out to him, despite the dirt on his body. She asked if he got hurt during his journey, and Alan explained that he had just been navigating the goblin maze. When he inquired about how she had been, she insisted she was fine as always. As they chatted about the next-door neighbor, Alan listened with curiosity after such a long time. Soon, his mother brought up the topic of him spending more time inside the house. She believed that the money he earned should be his to spend, and she regretted not having more space for him to keep his belongings. Alan mentioned that he had been contemplating moving out for various reasons. He wanted to provide his mother with a better life and suggested that having her live with him could be a great option. He expressed his desire for her to continue handling the housework as she always did. His mother, however, thought it was foolish of him to consider such a thing. She clarified that all she wanted was for him to lead a happy life, and she didn't want to burden him with household responsibilities. Realizing that Alan had the next day off, they decided to look for a house. They soon reached out to Rudolph to discuss the idea of a new house. Alan's mother asked about Alan causing problems for them, but Rudolph said Alan was doing well. They formally introduced themselves to the old man, who praised Alan as the most promising with a perfect track record. The old man mentioned that Alan was a low-ranked adventurer, and when parties were brought up, Alan felt the need to organize one but worried about minimal commissions. Discussing living arrangements in the guild, the old man advised against it. Alan then inquired if the old man could recommend a good real estate agent for them. Not long after, Monica came in and asked Alan if he was thinking about moving out. They chatted for a while about it, and when Alan mentioned considering a new place, Monica suggested he could come to her house anytime. This made Alan even more nervous. He couldn't quite grasp her intentions at first. Monica went on to explain that her father manages an apartment building and offered to show Alan and his family around. She thought it would be a great idea for them to check it out. The old man chimed in, agreeing with Monica and stating that they would all be safe there. When the topic of money came up, Alan felt reassured. The housing prices had been increasing, so he thought they would be fine with Monica's offer. Before they left for her place, Alan's mother insisted she greet the guild members for a while. Monica then approached Alan, asking what he imagined after hearing her inviting him to her house. Alan understood she was teasing him, and they all headed to the streets to check out the apartment building where Monica lived. Monica claimed they could have the top floor, mentioning it wasn't popular because it was challenging to navigate. However, Alan thought it would be easier for them since they had to reach the 5th floor in their current housing situation. Upon entering the room, Alan realized it was more spacious than his previous one. He considered making the bigger room his bedroom as it offered a clear view of the city, and he could fit many things in there. When his mother understood the pricing, she thanked Monica for helping them. She mentioned that Alan could be considered a good investment, a notion he found hard to grasp. When he returned to the guild, the old man asked about the situation, and Alan explained they stayed with Monica in the same building. The folks at the guild were impressed. Watching someone so young showing genuine concern for his mother, cheers erupted as Alan achieved something new. One of the guild members, Jared, invited the others in, assisting their filial boy Alan with moving furniture and luggage. Alan insisted they needn't bother, but they were determined to help anyway. Even Alan's mother thanked him for having such supportive friends. Alan started feeling happy about the situation. Witnessing this, he felt a warm glow inside despite knowing they weren't great in many situations. As they worked together to move out, Alan sensed they were an unusual group, lugging stuff around the house. Alan's mother even shed tears of gratitude during the process. After completing the task, Jared thanked everyone for being with him during the ordeal. As things settled down, the group suggested having a banquet to celebrate. Alan's mother expressed gratitude for the support they received and hoped to stay in the house for as long as possible. Alan, determined to improve his life, felt a strong urge to protect those around him. When everyone gathered to share a drink, the drunk old men started talking about how beautiful Alan's mother was. They all competed to be Alan's future father-in-law, but Rudolph told them to stop the uncomfortable topic. Just when Alan felt thankful to him, Rudolph announced that he was the one gunning for Alan's mother. Alan couldn't accept seeing his master hitting on his mother. The night concluded with a beautiful event, and the next morning, Alan resumed his work. He continued honing his skills to combat monsters and earned more money in the Goblin Maze using the same technique. Over time, Alan gained the title of Goblin Slayer due to his persistent dedication to eliminating goblins. Shortly after, a bipedal wild boar appeared in the forest. Alan aimed and shot it with his machine gun. He unknowingly killed one of Inosuke's brethren. Alan was situated in a forest known as Orc Forest, where people had established a wooded area to deal with monster attacks. Mountain orcs posed a threat to humans, but their meat was valuable. Residents created this area to defend against monsters, and Alan took on the task of reducing the danger. Unbeknownst to him, these orcs were connected to the Great Orc Maze, which was Alan's next target for leveling up and earning rewards. Alan used hollow bullets that deformed to increase the destruction area, primarily using them for hunting. Given the toughness of orcs, he used hummingbirds and Kalashnikovs for stronger opponents. He decided to venture into the maze the following day. In the evening, Alan savored the meat from the orc he had killed, experiencing a sense of ecstasy. Strangely, he even appeared in front of us naked. The following day, he visited the Grand Orc Maze. Similar to a regular maze, one had to defeat weaker orcs before reaching the boss. Instead of collecting meat, he gathered magic stones from them since there was no space for meat in his bag. Consequently, the final boss, along with the average bosses from earlier, awaited him at the end. He decided to employ the same tactics as before. Initially targeting orc sorcerers and priests, he created a smoke screen followed by activating concealment. Unexpectedly, the main boss counterattacked with magic. Looking up, he realized the king was controlling the attacks against him. To break the connection, he needed to separate them. Creating another smoke screen, the monsters anticipated an attack from behind, but Alan surprised them by using chili pepper extract from the opposite side. While the monsters were frozen in disbelief, he shot them all with his machine gun. During this chaos, the Orc King's eyes had healed, making him a formidable opponent. Striking a pose, the monster charged toward Alan. Although he periodically shot at him, the bullets bounced off. Alan successfully dodged the Orc King's attack, causing the monster to hit the wall. Although frightened, Alan managed to escape unscathed. He quickly activated his concealment ability and switched his weapon to a Kalashnikov. Aiming the Orc King's vulnerable spots between the eyes and the heart, Alan shot at the monster. Infuriated, the Orc King aggressively approached Alan. Without hesitation, Alan fired another shot, making the monster crash into the wall once more. Alan, anticipating the next move, rolled on the ground, preparing for his next attack. To his surprise, he realized the Orc King had succumbed to a fatal shot in the heart. Despite limited space in his bag, Alan decided to collect some of the monster's meat. At the heart of the maze, Alan discovered a treasure, a fertility bracelet that increases a woman's pregnancy rate. This puzzled him, leading him to question the inclusion of such items in the game. Regardless, he emerged victorious, conquering the labyrinth of the orcs. In the elf village, we see a peaceful atmosphere. The place where the kids play has now turned into an airport. Alan often visited the village to buy honey, and the villagers were always friendly, helping him take care of the airport. It was a favorite place for kids to play games, including archery. Sherry, as usual, kept kicking Alan's aircraft, but thankfully it never broke. When Alan celebrated his 13th birthday, he became eligible to move up to level D and earned the title of Orc Slayer. The queen informed him that the honey he requested was loaded onto his glider, and he thanked her. She offered it for free, but Alan insisted on paying, explaining that his mother loved it. The queen then asked about Alan's next journey, which he revealed would take him to the Wind Mountain Maze. In the game, this maze had a difficulty level of 30, much more challenging than the Orc Maze and Dragon Valley at level 15. At the end of the Wind Mountain Maze awaited Blizzard Phoenix, a tough opponent that Alan didn't feel ready to face. The Elf Queen inquired about the maze's danger level, but Alan assured her that he could handle it thanks to the amulet she had given him. As they talked, our resident ex-Lolicon, the Spirit of Light Lu, approached them, expressing concerns about not joining Alan on his journey. This left Alan somewhat relieved not to have such a weird person following him. In the Wind City, within the Zyvan Guild, Alan approached the mission to conquer the Wind Mountain Labyrinth alone. The Guildmaster was surprised by his decision but granted him permission to proceed. It was crucial to enter the maze with permission, otherwise any items obtained would be considered stolen. The Guildmaster had told Alan to reach only the first level, but Alan assured him that he would proceed cautiously among the experienced adventurers tackling the maze's conquest. His solo approach seemed reckless to others. In the Labyrinth of Wind Mountain, the record for conquering the 30-level maze was only 8 levels. It was a complicated maze with challenging challenges. Despite this, Alan had a trump card, his new Saiga 12 shotgun. His shotgun broke the adventurer's record, allowing him to reach level 28 with floating islands where manipulating wind force could move you to different islands. Alan discovered a hidden treasure room at the base of one floating island. Instead of the conventional method, he used his smelt skill to create steps and claim the treasure. The reward included rings capable of reviving a person once if they died. Eagerly, he took both rings and proceeded toward the door leading to the main boss. Before facing the boss, Blizzard Phoenix, Alan decided to seize more treasures. Blizzard Phoenix attacked immediately, releasing spikes from the ice. However, Alan knew this from the plot and made a shield in advance. After passing the first attack, the remaining attacks were only a combination of concealment and machine attacks. A bullet hit the Phoenix, but he quickly stepped back. Alan tried to activate concealment, but the Phoenix attacked him with a snowstorm and ice arrows. This slowed down Alan, who created a boulder and hid behind it. While hiding, the Phoenix continued its magical attacks. Alan decided to use Nikov from a distance and then Saiga. He turned on concealment and shot at the Phoenix. Immediately, he created another boulder to hide behind. He waited until the Phoenix's attack stopped, came out of hiding, and attacked the Phoenix several times. The Phoenix was badly injured, and Alan hid behind a boulder again. When he emerged from hiding, he saw the bird falling and he slipped and fell on the frozen ground. He managed to stop just before the Phoenix fell, keeping it alive. Alan finished off the Phoenix and then began to dismantle its body. Surprisingly, the Phoenix's feathers remained beautiful even after removal. Alan also decided to collect the bones, which turned out to be incredibly lightweight. Inside a treasure chest, he found the Sword of the Sky Knight. This weapon bestowed the blessing of a knight upon the wielder and allowed an upgrade to the Heaven Knight along with the additional gift of wind magic. However, the most precious discovery in the maze was the Magic Stone Synthesizer, which enlarged smaller magic stones when combined, increasing their value. Alan planned to use the synthesizer every time he returned to the maze. He resolved to keep the details of his progress a closely guarded secret. Back in the city, Master Rudolph noticed that Alan was still engaged in ditch cleaning. Alan explained that he did this only during his spare time. Rudolph inquired about Alan's plans for the upcoming year. As he was now 14 and eligible to attend high school, Rudolph requested Alan's assistance on a guard-related task that would help him raise his level and reputation. Initially uninterested, Alan attempted to refuse, fearing that it might reveal too much about his battle capabilities. However, when Jared arrived, along with other adventurers announcing they were ready to work with him, Alan found himself facing unexpected and persistent demands. Rudolph set a 7 a.m. schedule, and Alan, trapped in a cloud of alcohol-scented breath, realized he had little choice but to comply. Alan found himself on an escort mission, accompanying a little girl named Carlin, along with his older brother Dirk. Their journey was to a small village where Dirk regularly delivered essential supplies like coal, wood, and dried meat from the royal capital. Carlin, a spirited young girl, had a keen interest in Al's wind magic, and the two quickly developed a close bond. A few other adventurers, including the formidable Jared, joined them on this journey. However, Carlin was hesitant to get close to Jared due to his intimidating appearance. The route they followed led through a treacherous mountainous area known for bandit activity. It was the responsibility of Al's team to protect the caravan from these threats. Despite the tension of the mission, Carlin and Alan got along splendidly, and she had grown quite attached to him. Alan had left his powerful Kalashnikov and assault rifles behind, but carried a small Makarov pistol discreetly concealed under his clothes. While he might have seemed formidable to others, Alan struggled with the moral dilemma of whether he could use it against a living, pleading person, unlike the monsters he was used to dealing with. Carlin's sweet interruption broke through his contemplation, and she inquired about his well-being. Meanwhile, Jared issued a warning, explaining that the path ahead would become narrower, making them vulnerable to bandit attacks. The carriage pulled by horses pushed forward, but suddenly a barrage of stones began to rain down from a nearby cliff. These stones obstructed their path, bringing Dirk's carriage to a halt. Bandits swiftly encircled the carriages, closing in from both the front and the rear, brandishing daggers and demanding the goods they carried. The adventurers instructed Dirk to stay inside the carriage while they unsheathed their swords and readied their bows. Amidst this tense standoff, a skirmish erupted with one adventurer successfully striking a blow against one of the bandits. Jared, the leader of the expedition, ordered Alan to employ his magical abilities against the bandits. Although Alan was proficient in dealing with monsters, he found himself grappling with which technique to use on humans. When one of the bandits nearly lunged at a fellow adventurer, Alan swiftly employed his wind magic, injuring the assailant. The other bandits, now aware of his extraordinary abilities, panicked and fled. Jared then instructed Alan to eliminate the remaining bandits, but Alan's compassion and moral quandaries deterred him, causing the bandits to escape. While the other adventurers celebrated their victory, Jared stayed furious, directing his anger at Alan, the 14-year-old boy who had spared the lives of the bandits. Alan, confused, explained that he couldn't bring himself to kill people. Jared insisted on the importance of eliminating such threats, likening them to monsters that could harm others in the future. With a stern message, Jared retreated into the carriage, leaving Alan puzzled. His senpai asked Alan for help in clearing rocks from the road. They quickly finished the task, ensuring a safe journey to the village. Upon arrival, they were greeted by joyful villagers and children engaged in village business. Excitedly, the villagers rushed to help unload the cargo. The girls in particular eagerly examined the clothes before bringing them inside. Carlin initially wanted to appear cool and different, but ended up choosing a dress she liked. Dirk distributed the requested goods to everyone. Alan observed in silence as Jared questioned why the mission would have failed if he had been the leader. Alan straightforwardly replied that it was because he didn't kill the bandits. Jared acknowledged his mistake, stating that there wasn't much difference between monsters and these bandits. He vowed not to delay next time. Alan understood his words. At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by Carlin and a group of small children. They were curious to see his wind magic. Jared decided to leave, allowing Carlin to entertain the children. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Alan continued demonstrating his wind magic. The kids eventually went back to their homes, and the evening brought a lively village celebration, a customary event for welcoming male visitors. Despite the villagers being gracious hosts, this village had a unique practice. Men from afar would come to fertilize the women to prevent their blood from thickening. During the celebration, Alan was surprised when one of the older women invited him to bed. Flustered, Alan questioned the peculiar customs, feeling like he had stumbled into an otome game. The group had planned to stay in the village for 3 days. The tranquility of the evening was disrupted by bed activity noises echoing from the neighboring rooms. Alan later noticed tired men emerging from their overnight accommodations, a common occurrence as they didn't have wives of their own. Alan had intended to spend the next day playing with the children, but the village had delivered devastating news. Carlin had been kidnapped. The announcement filled Alan with horror and dread as he worried about the safety of his young friend. Carlin and other children had been abducted while playing outside the protective walls of the village. Upon hearing the distressing news, Alan quickly changed into his adventure gear, feeling guilty and thinking that his failure to deal with the bandits had caused the current dire situation. Fueled by remorse, he was determined to rescue Carlin and the other kidnapped children, blaming himself for the whole predicament. Alan approached Jared, admitting that the abduction was his fault for not taking decisive action against the bandits earlier. Jared agreed with Alan's assessment but advised him to stay calm. He explained that he would handle the rescue mission alone because adventurers usually only intervene in cases requested by the Scent, and the bandit leader had sent a letter to the village with demands for the hostages' safety. The letter stated that the village needed to provide women, food, and money, and any resistance would lead to the death of the captive children. Jared's words served as a harsh reminder of the serious consequences of their previous encounter with the bandits. As Alan fell into a heavy silence, the other adventurers pondered the challenging situation. Jared then asked Alan directly if he was now prepared to kill the bandits in order to save the kidnapped children. Recalling Carlin's innocent and endearing smile, Alan responded with newfound determination, confirming his readiness to take lives to rescue the innocent. The adventurers decided to accept the village's request despite the moral dilemmas it posed. In this moment of crisis, Dirk, Carlin's older brother, grasped Alan's hand and implored him to save his sister. Alan gave Dirk his word, promising to do whatever it took to rescue Carlin. Accompanied by Jared, he embarked on a mission to track down and confront the bandits who had kidnapped Carlin and other children from the village. Jared explained that there were only a few places where the bandits could be hiding, and they were a couple of hours away from their current location. They reached a vantage point in the forest from which they could observe the bandits' hideout. The hideout was situated in a cave with a spacious interior, suggesting the presence of around 30 bandits. Alan was determined to approach the hideout stealthily, a decision that Jared initially found to be a reckless idea. However, Alan was confident in his stealth abilities and believed that there might be fewer bandits inside the cave than anticipated. Jared had questioned his actions, wondering what he would do if they discovered about 10 bandits inside. Undeterred, Alan assured Jared that he had a plan. After testing his magic, Alan asked Jared to trust him, emphasizing the importance of the children's lives being at stake. Although hesitant, Jared trusted him but warned that if Alan failed, the children would die. Alan thanked Jared for his trust and went to their hideout with his senpai hidden and awaiting his signal. Carefully navigating the area, Alan utilized his concealment magic to make himself virtually invisible. This ensured that he would not be detected as he approached the bandits' hideout, a cave in the mountains. At the cave entrance, a guard stood who had been present during the attack on the carriage. Despite his anger, Alan refrained from killing the guard and silently entered the cave. Using his appraisal magic, Alan assessed the cave's interior, realizing it was more spacious than he had initially thought. Now, his primary objective was to locate the abducted children inside the cave. As he examined the area, he counted about 13 bandits and identified 3 different paths within the cave. Along one of these paths, 2 children were confined in a cage, but Carlin was not among them. Determined to find her, Alan pressed onward, following the sounds emanating from a nearby door. Upon opening the door, he was met with a distressing sight, a man attempting to harm Carlin. Filled with rage, Alan swiftly used his fist to subdue the assailant until he no longer posed a threat. Carlin, frightened yet relieved, found herself safe once more in this perilous situation. Alan extended his hand to assure her safety. Carlin, with a mix of embarrassment and delight, almost shouted his name, but Alan quickly silenced her, urging her not to make noise. Calming down, Carl took her hand and led her to a secure place while he rescued other children. He sealed the room with a stone to prevent anyone from finding it, activating a concealment. Proceeding to the prison room with the children, Alan encountered a guard sitting with a gun. After a moment's hesitation, he shot the guard in the head, and the man immediately perished. Though the children were frightened and tearful, Alan urged them to be quiet. Taking them to Carlin, he reassured everyone, creating a thinner stone to seal the room from the inside. Asking the children to cover their ears, Alan drew a spell seal visible to the bandits. The children followed his instructions, and the bandits, unable to comprehend the situation, were blown away as Alan exerted his power. Because of the explosion, Jared was very surprised and realized that it was the signal he had mentioned. Alan told the children to stay inside, and he went out to check the situation. He saw a group of people terribly injured but still breathing. He considered whether to eliminate them but chose to prioritize evacuating the children. At that moment, one of the surviving bandits attempted to attack him with a dagger in his mouth, but Jared quickly took him down. Alan was surprised to see Jared and felt relieved. He instructed everyone to return to the village. As they emerged from the cave, Alan praised Carlin for her excellent job in holding on. The children, overwhelmed with emotion, cried and rushed to hug both Alan and Jared. The heads of the bandits who had attacked the children were hung on the village's fence as a form of public humiliation. After this grim task, his senpai instructed Alan to prepare for their journey back to the capital. Meanwhile, the other adventurers returned to deal with any surviving bandits. In a world where failing to defend oneself could lead to death, The necessity of eliminating the bandits, as cruel as it seemed, was emphasized. This harsh reality was apparent to Alan, and it was a lesson he needed to learn. The adventurers loaded their belongings onto the carriage in preparation for their return to the capital. As they made these preparations, 3 children approached Alan to express their gratitude for his heroic actions in rescuing them. They also asked if he would show them his wind magic again someday. Alan happily promised them with a smile, and as the group prepared to depart, the children bid farewell. After the guild finished analyzing the tasks, Alan became the youngest adventurer to receive the C rank. He finally turned 15. Katerina was surprised that he did a good job tying a tie. She was upset that she couldn't tie it for him. She then hugged him, expressing her pride and wishing him the best of luck. Today was important, the day we had all been waiting for so long. Alan finally began his school life at the Royal Academy. All the new students were greeted by the head of the school and they were asked to sit down in their places. Checking the list this year, including our young talent, 39 people were enrolled. Alan was able to enter the class second on the list, along with all the noble bigwigs. All of his classmates were aristocrats and commoners were not allowed to communicate with them first. So Alan could simply be invisible at that moment. The one who made Alan's blood and heartbeat faster appeared in the corridor. Yes, the main villain of the game is Anastasia Kleiner von Ramlet. She was beautiful and exuded a magnificent aura. She looked in Alan's direction, which made him nervous. He couldn't believe that, in the game, after other characters like Oscar von Wimlet, the son of the richest man in the kingdom, and the bespectacled Marcus von Bynes with the blessing of the sage, who is the son of the head of the royal magic, there was also Leonardo von Jukes, whose father is the commander of the Royal Guard, and Claude Justine de Westerdale, the prince of another country with the blessing of the Fist King. All these characters were effective in the game, and naturally all the girls were crazy about them. They looked at Alan and claimed that he was quite ordinary, which made him a little angry. Then the main target character, His Highness Crown Prince Karl Heinz Bartile von Centralen, appeared. All the other girls were crazy about him and admired him. He truly had the aura of a crown prince. And now, surprisingly, the main character of the whole story, Amy von Breus, appeared. Amy warmly greeted Alan and mentioned that she had known his name. Her unexpected attention left Alan wondering how she knew him. Amy shared that she had been born into a commoner family and had attended the same school as Alan. She expressed amazement at his rapid progression through classes with perfect grades, prompting her to strike up a conversation with him. This was a surprising and unexpected development in the story. Alan had completely forgotten about her, but according to the game's plot, she should have first talked to the prince, not to him. When Amy asked if there was something wrong with him, he said nothing. As expected from the Otomy game, it turned out to be very cute. A week after the school's opening ceremony, Alan prepared to move into the school dormitory, indicating that he wouldn't be able to visit for some time. Katerina expressed how much she would miss him and asked if he had made any friends. Although Alan replied in the affirmative, in reality, he had been largely ignored at school. His classmates paid him little attention, and Amy, after becoming the Crown Prince's girlfriend, started to ignore him. During a magic lesson, the teacher explained how to use magic and control its power. When he asked who could successfully perform magic attacks, only a few people, including Alan, raised their hands. The professor then called on the Crown Prince to demonstrate his abilities to the others. Considering himself cool, the Crown Prince agreed and activated his flame blessing. He aimed at the target and successfully hit it, earning applause from everyone. Next up was Anastasia, who expressed her willingness to try. However, the Crown Prince ignored her, showing signs of dislike. Unbothered, she activated her power, firing it at the target in the form of an arrow, and destroying it completely. This surprised everyone, including Alan, who hadn't expected this from the final boss of the autumn game. Instead of receiving admiration, the Crown Prince got angry, accusing Anastasia of mocking him. She tried to explain, but his anger escalated. Determined to show his real strength, he asked her to move away. As she did, he activated his power, but suddenly his magic exploded in his hand. Quick on her feet, Anastasia reacted by building a wall of ice, preventing further damage and protecting the rest of the students. She really wanted to talk to the Crown Prince, but when she approached, she saw Amy already by his side, holding his hand and using her magic. This made her angry. Alan worried that Amy's healing wouldn't work, but it did, and the Crown Prince woke up. Anastasia offered her handkerchief, but he ignored her, only thanking Amy. Amy, feeling embarrassed, mentioned she couldn't do more for him, which made Anastasia a bit upset. She left them alone. In the game, this part ends quickly, but in real life, healing takes time. Amy grinned, saying she didn't like Anastasia. She seemed like a bad person. After this, Amy and Crown Prince Karl became close, and the other girls became jealous. Anastasia's friends insulted Amy openly, showing no support. In the game, they disappear after the Civil War. At that moment, Anastasia appeared and told them they should feel ashamed for saying and doing vulgar things. She asked them to stop, and the girls apologized and obeyed her. At the same time, Amy, who was hoping for attention, made a cute face and complained to the guys that everyone was avoiding her. The guys supported her, and Amy used bullying to get closer to them. Alan thought that Amy's character was different from the one in the game, which didn't depict such events. He didn't know if everything followed the game's scenario, considering Amy was initially a commoner who later became an aristocrat. She had to attend an aristocratic school and faced bullying, relying on her sweetness and charm as her only way to succeed after graduation. Amy's shower scene puzzled Alan, wondering why the author portrayed these details. In the class, the girls supported either Anastasia or the Crown Prince, with no one supporting Amy. Although the girls tried to mock her, Amy defended herself. The Crown Prince's supporters understood he was using Amy to distance Anastasia, but they felt no sympathy for Amy because the prince ignored her. People outside the school aware of this might be plotting against the Crown Prince. People supported the egoistic Crown Prince who cared only about his opinions and ignored everything else, which saddened many. As for Alan's academic life, he lived in peace like a shadow, unnoticed by others. The summer holidays had arrived and students had to prepare a research paper for the break. This paper would significantly impact the class they would be placed in the next semester. The aristocrat who ranked last found it crucial. To Alan's surprise, Anastasia personally approached him. She sat on her knees and asked for his help, expressing that formalities were unnecessary. Alan, being a scholarship student and at the top of the class, surprised her. Anastasia inquired if he had experience with mazes, to which Alan confirmed. She mentioned having a message and bid him goodbye, apologizing for the disturbance. Initially perplexed by the term messenger, Alan thought Anastasia might be following him. However, a few days later, everything became clear. He was asked to be the guide for characters from an Otome game, leaving him no choice but to agree. When he questioned their readiness, the Crown Prince arrogantly confirmed their preparedness. As a result, they reached the ruins of the Goblin Maze that everyone had been circling around. Amy was repeatedly warned by others to be careful and not to fall. Anastasia got annoyed with the constant advice and felt cold in the game. Initially, they were supposed to be accompanied by other adventurers, but the game scenario changed when Anastasia turned to him inside the maze. Everyone was amazed at the glittering surroundings, but they complained about various things. However, when Amy started talking about the beautifully shining walls, opinions changed and compliments started pouring in. Alan, feeling annoyed, believed that Anastasia was on the verge of exploding. However, when he looked at her, he saw a beautiful sight. Anastasia looked divine and made Alan feel embarrassed. Amy inquired about the presence of monsters, but Alan explained that this place used to be a goblin maze, and adventurers had destroyed their nest, so there were no monsters now. The Crown Prince started complaining about the purpose of hiring them, and Alan apologized. Suddenly, Amy began searching for something, prompting Alan to ask what she was doing. This irritated the Crown Prince, and Alan once again asked for forgiveness. Everyone grew bored, and no one noticed Alan's stories except for the beautiful Anastasia, who found them interesting. Alan noticed Amy searching on the ground again, right where the appraisal scroll had been hidden before. Everyone reacted differently to this maze. Amy seemed surprised, lost in thought. When Alan asked her what she was thinking, she just said she was pondering the usefulness of adventurers. Amy was searching for the scroll in the exact spot it was hidden before, leading Alan to realize she was the same reincarnated person familiar with the world of Otome games. After finishing their exploration of the maze, everyone exited and people started approaching Amy again. Anastasia thanked Alan for seeing them off, and he smiled, considering it an honor. In the game, Anastasia had shown more jealousy, but now she behaved calmly. It seemed like the game world was slowly changing. Anastasia then invited Alan to spend time with her the next day, and he agreed. They decided to meet in front of the school gates. On the day of the meetup, Alan nervously waited in front of the school. Suddenly, a carriage arrived and Anastasia stepped out looking stunning. She apologized for keeping him waiting and they got into the carriage. She thanked him for agreeing to accompany her, and they shifted the conversation to the report of their recent expedition where they consulted with experts. Anastasia explained that she had arranged meetings with researchers in the fields of labyrinths and local historical ruins. Alan was surprised by her dedication to this endeavor. She told him that the Crown Prince and Prince Cloud of Western Dale were also involved in this report, and the success of this project was essential for their country's future and peace between the two nations. Alan felt compelled to assist her despite the challenges with the aristocrats. They met with various scientists and researched materials from previous reports, but initially none of the information seemed particularly useful. With determination, they persevered, working through their difficulties, and eventually, they managed to complete the report. Upon receiving the report, the Crown Prince dismissed it, claiming it was too lengthy. He requested that they summarize everything in just 3 minutes. Though Alan was irritated and had no desire to assist the spoiled prince, he noticed the pitiful look in Anastasia's eyes. Reluctantly, he explained the report to the Crown Prince, simplifying it so that he could understand, and said it was a great job. His Highness left the room, leaving Alan frustrated with the situation. Anastasia had apologized to Alan for the Crown Prince's behavior. Her sad expression weighed on him, and she seemed like someone forced into an undesirable fate. Despite his annoyance and frustration with the aristocracy, Alan continued to support her. As a result, their report was highly appreciated among the professors of the academy and outside the school. All people admired the two princes. Of course, the main author had to be indicated, and he was criticized for it. Alan luckily managed to have his name included, but he had to endure it until winter. After the winter, he planned to defeat the prince and others, following which he would drop out of school. Autumn arrived, signaling the upcoming cultural festival. While everyone was excitedly discussing the festival, Alan worried about the obligation to participate. He had already submitted a solo application, but then Anastasia approached him. She asked about his plans for the festival, and he, feeling embarrassed, mentioned he had already submitted a solo application. Anastasia suggested helping the Crown Prince, understanding the situation, and wished him good luck before leaving. Alan, confused, considered contacting Amy or Anastasia's group. He remained interested in their conversation, so he activated his concealment ability and hid in the room where they were discussing the festival plans. As expected, all the attention focused on Amy, while Anastasia seemed almost invisible. Everyone was thirsty, and Amy arrogantly asked Anastasia to bring them tea, claiming she wasn't busy. This annoyed Alan a bit, but Anastasia calmly agreed. The group decided to have tea in the garden, but Amy chose to stay in the room with Anastasia. Suddenly, Amy began questioning why Anastasia was there, as she wasn't doing anything. Anastasia coldly fell silent, prompting Amy to tease her, suggesting the Crown Prince deserved a cute princess, not someone like Anastasia. These words angered her, and Amy, acting like a clown, told her to smile. Anastasia, displeased with Amy's behavior, asserted that her status was still higher. Amy, different from the game's character, insisted they were all the same. Anastasia, getting angry, replied that Amy's behavior wouldn't undermine her status. At that moment, Amy portrayed herself as the victim, and the Crown Prince abruptly opened the door. Amy's manipulative behavior left Anastasia shocked as she tried to explain, but the Crown Prince refused to listen. He ordered Anastasia to clean up the room, and she complied without a word, gathering her belongings and leaving the office. In the corridor, Amy taunted Anastasia, suggesting she had stolen her fiancé. This was the breaking point for Anastasia, who attempted to punch Amy. Just then, Alan appeared, sneezed, pretended not to witness the confrontation, asked for forgiveness, and quickly left the scene. Anastasia, surprised to see Alan there, regained her composure. She responded to Amy with dignity, asserting that Amy was not worthy of the Crown Prince, and then she left. Amy was left alone in the corridor, extremely annoyed that Alan, like a mob, constantly interfered in her affairs. Having heard everything, Alan reached a significant realization. He concluded that Amy, like him, had been reborn and aimed to create a reverse harem for herself, sticking to the main plot of the game, despite knowing about the potential war. Alan had been determined to stop her. It would have been so easy to kill her. If only he had the power of invisibility, he would have done it. Now let's explore the story from the perspective of our heroines. We'll begin with Amy, the main character of this world. Amy was born into a poor family where she had to endure hardships. However, after being struck down by a carriage, her memories returned. She realized that this world was just an autumn game she loved playing in her previous life. Despite dying in high school due to an incident, she had no regrets about her miserable life and was happy to be reborn. In the end, she discovered that she was the illegitimate child of an aristocrat. Both she and her mother were taken into the Baron Breeze family. For an otaku like her, playing the harem game was easy, and she eventually entered high school Anastasia. Learning that commoners ranked second and third in the school surprised Anastasia. She asked her assistant to gather information about them. In second place was Alan, who grew up in a poor family but graduated from a commoner school with perfect grades. He was also an adventurer. The second was Amy, fortunate that her father turned out to be an aristocrat, blessed with special treatment. Anastasia decided to keep an eye on them, believing that these two could receive support from the opposition faction. In the office on the first day, she saw Alan, who seemed ordinary to her. She needed to be careful with him. Amy entered the classroom and drew attention to Mob, who took second place. She hadn't seen him before, so on the first day, she decided to greet and chat with him. Hoping he would fall for her, she realized he was ordinary, so she decided to ignore him. The main concern for Anastasia was the third student, Amy, who flirted with the Crown Prince, her fiancé. Anastasia worried this could lead to chaos in the kingdom. As the person in charge of the aristocrats, she wanted Carl to understand everything. However, Amy's low-level healing abilities took a lot of time, but they attracted the prince's attention. Carl trusted her too much, and Amy won the hearts of all the main men in the Automy game. Amy didn't care about bullying from other characters, but Anastasia, who had everything perfect, annoyed her. Anastasia was glad that in the end, Anastasia's life would end terribly. Anastasia saw that she was in second place according to the results of the last exam. Feeling defeated in front of Alan, she focused on studying. During the ruins expedition, Amy discovered that the appraisal scroll was missing. She thought there was no such scroll in this world with a difficult level, but for an experienced otaku like her, it wasn't a problem. Anastasia was glad she invited Alan as their guide and was amazed by his knowledge and hard work. Amy noticed Anastasia and the commoner getting along well and wanted to make him her faithful ally. Anastasia thought of inviting him to the team for a cultural festival, but Alan refused. In the discussion room, Amy angered Anastasia, but the Crown Prince appeared, disrupting her plans. After scaring Anastasia, he left with Amy, leaving Anastasia satisfied. She didn't give up easily, attempting to provoke Amy again. However, Alan appeared and prevented a catastrophe, angering Amy. Anastasia collected her thoughts and held on with dignity until the end. Anastasia remembered being saved by Alan in her room that evening. The following morning, Alan landed his plane and complained about how cold it had been. However, the chilly weather was just right for preserving the freshness of the luggage he had brought. He decided to open his stall. Later at school, the festival began, and Anastasia ran into Margaret, who invited her to explore. Anastasia agreed, and the two noble girls wandered around, eventually stumbling upon Alan's stall. To their surprise, he was selling orc meat. Anastasia was shocked, but Margaret, originally from Altmund, where orc meat was a delicacy, couldn't help but drool at the sight. However, Anastasia noticed other students keeping their distance, and Margaret explained that it was because orcs weren't native to the area, making people in the capital uneasy about eating their meat. This observation sparked an idea in Anastasia's mind. Meanwhile, Alan felt disappointed when he saw the nobles react with shock to the sight of orc meat. He considered taking any leftovers to the guild. Then Anastasia and Margaret came up to him to order a skewer of orc meat. Anastasia also introduced Margaret, who said she might fuss over orc meat. When Alan learned Margaret was from Altmund, he offered her a skewer after making sure the meat was fresh from there. Margaret took a bite, and it felt like a scene straight out of Shokugeki no Soma. She couldn't believe such perfectly seasoned and high-quality meat could be so cheap, but Alan didn't mind since it was a cultural festival. Anastasia, knowing Altmund was quite far away, wondered how Alan managed to get the fresh meat. Alan said it was a secret route, an adventurer's privilege. He couldn't mention his airplane. While they were munching, Margaret declared that orc meat was something rare and valuable not to be ignored in the capital. Anastasia also started enjoying the orc meat. Students who had been watching the two girls also became interested in trying orc meat. They started ordering from Alan's stall, and Anastasia and Margaret soon excused themselves. Before leaving, Alan genuinely thanked them, but the girls insisted they were just passing by casually. Alan then invited them to watch his orc dismantling show, but they declined and left. Alan then decided to visit the Crown Prince's exhibit later and resumed his business. After selling all his orc meat, Alan decided to explore other exhibits in the afternoon. He came across the Crown Prince's exhibit, but it was empty, with no receptionist in sight. The exhibit was titled, Life in the Kingdom's Downtown, portraying the life of a commoner in the capital. However, the display didn't accurately depict the real life of a commoner, making him wonder if a noble's understanding was that limited. While wandering around, Alan noticed some embroidery and met Margaret. She warmly invited him to their group's exhibit. Inside the room, he was surprised to find Anastasia in a simple one-piece dress. She explained that she had been kicked out of the Crown Prince's group, and Margaret invited her to join the embroidery exhibit, revealing that she was interested in embroidery in the first place. Anastasia sighed, admitting she had only been acting for the Crown Prince's sake. She asked Alan not to pity her and encouraged him to look around. As Margaret showcased her elegant and beautiful work, she eventually presented Anastasia's creation, which depicted cakes and fruits. Alan, not an embroidery expert, felt suddenly hungry after seeing Anastasia's work. Trying to clarify, he assured Anastasia that he didn't mean it in a strange way and complimented her piece. Margaret then informed Alan that the festival was ending, and it was time to clean up. After he left, Margaret noticed Anastasia's flushed face. Anastasia explained that her piece made her seem solely interested in sweets, to which Margaret agreed, teasing her about her big appetite. That very afternoon, the award ceremony began, and the exhibit by the Crown Prince won first place. Everyone praised them for shedding light on the lives of the poor through interviews. During his gratitude speech, the Crown Prince attributed the success to Amy's idea. Alan couldn't believe how they spoke highly of helping the poor, yet they would later discard the displayed food as trash without letting anyone eat it. Aware that Karl was the next in line for the throne, Alan foresaw trouble for the country in the future. With winter approaching, he worried about Anastasia facing condemnation. However, there was another step to take. Amy needed to face harassment from Anastasia and her friends, leading to her being pushed down the stairs. Alan believed that should be the turning point, but things were progressing too quickly compared to the original story. Amy had noticed how quickly the breakup between Anastasia and the Crown Prince was progressing. Based on the game, she was now certain that Carl's storyline was completely secure. She anticipated some obligatory harassment from Anastasia and her friends, but nothing was happening. Without the expected harassment, there would be no reason to blame or condemn Anastasia. Amy worried that the situation was deviating from the original scenario, and wondered if it was acceptable to complete the storyline. Meanwhile, Alan believed that even without the anticipated event, the engagement would still be called off, and Anastasia would find her own happiness. To Alan's surprise, the expected scenario happened. Alan overheard other students gossiping about Anastasia harassing Amy out of jealousy, even going as far as burning her pen. He could only sigh as the event unfolded. Alan expected Carl to confront Anastasia while defending Amy, but it didn't happen that way. Instead, he instructed her to confess her alleged crimes. Anastasia, however, denied the accusations against her and her followers. From Alan's perspective, it was evident that Amy had a strong influence over the other guys. He wondered how far Amy would go to manipulate them. Anastasia had told them not to accuse her without any proof, and reminded them that class was starting. However, Leo stopped her and said they were still not done talking. Anastasia then told him that she hadn't given him permission to touch her, emphasizing the significant status gap between them. Leo insisted he would only let go if she pleaded guilty, making Anastasia wonder if she was being threatened. Suddenly, Alan apologized for interrupting them and reminded them that their class was starting. Carl told everyone to get going, clicking his tongue in irritation. Amy wondered why Alan kept interrupting, acting like a nuisance. Anastasia tried to talk to Alan about his actions, but he told her to hurry to class. Anastasia realized Alan was helping her, just like he did with Amy before. Alan in turn noticed that Amy was orchestrating things on her own, expecting a condemning event to unfold. Amy smirked, pleased that her plans were going as expected. Later, a party took place, and Carl, as the Crown Prince, hosted it for winning an award with his exhibit. During his self-praising speech, Alan felt uncomfortable. Margaret approached Alan with another noble girl named Isabella, expecting to be in the same class next term. However, Alan wasn't sure if he would still be in school at that time. Carl finally concluded his long narcissistic speech and thanked everyone. As he started talking about something else, Amy wore a grim smile. Carl then called his fiancée to come forward. In front of everyone, Carl declared that he was canceling their engagement. Anastasia wondered if it was okay since Amy wasn't even a noble who cared about her country. Amy questioned why Anastasia wasn't reacting as she did in the game. Carl hugged Amy and praised her for being genuine and kind, unlike Anastasia, who he claimed was rotten. Amy, with a disgusted expression, secretly hoped Carl would criticize Anastasia more. Anastasia warned Carl that he would bear the consequences of his decision. Alan noticed that Anastasia seemed different from the game, lacking anger or regret. He realized that Carl had made Anastasia realize he had given up on her long ago. Carl cautioned Anastasia about her words, suggesting that the Ramslets, known for their arrogance, would regret their actions. He mocked the Ramslet family for only being famous for growing wheat, irritating Anastasia. Amy had a realization upon hearing this. Anastasia asserted that she could handle insults directed at her, but not those aimed at her family and her father, the Duke. Amy added insult to injury, claiming Anastasia was lucky to have Carl's affection in the beginning since she came from a humble background. Anastasia, shocked at Amy's betrayal, decided to file a formal protest from the Ramslet family to the Bryce family. Amy accused Anastasia of using her family's influence cowardly. Ignoring them, Anastasia chose to leave, prompting Amy to complain about her turning her back on them. Suddenly, Leo asked Anastasia to stop and suggested that, as a noble, she should solve the problem herself before crying in front of her parents. Even Carl told her to do something about her gloves. Anastasia was confused since such small things had no use in the situation. Carl then started claiming that the daughter of a mighty duke had not even put up a gamble, and wondered if it was even worth raising a daughter like Anastasia. Nobles who were against the Ramslet family just laughed at the sides, and Anastasia wondered if Carl was asking for a duel. Carl told her to think of it herself, and claimed that a crown prince like him should spell it out for her. Anastasia sighed, took off her gloves, and approached Carl and Amy. Amy complained, suggesting Anastasia should have done it from the start. Anastasia tossed her gloves to Anna, who pretended to be hurt. Amy felt like she had won. She made it seem like the gloves fell on their own, and Anastasia couldn't believe she was waiting to insult her. Amy wondered if the game was bugged since Anastasia didn't retaliate. Carl confirmed the duel between Anastasia and Amy. Amy was shocked that she had to fight, and Alan pointed out that she set things up, so she should. Carl assured her, saying he would represent her. Anastasia protested, questioning why Carl was making a woman duel. Carl clarified that Anastasia challenged them and he was just protecting Amy. The guys around Amy offered to protect her as well. Margaret worried about Anastasia, and when Carl asked if she had a representative, no one spoke up. Carl laughed, assuming the Ramslet family's daughter had lost popularity. Surprisingly, Alan raised his hand and volunteered to represent Anastasia. Shocked, Anastasia rushed to Alan, expressing concern about the dangerous duel against royalty. With a calm expression, Alan agreed. Confused, Anastasia repeated his words, and Alan confirmed that she approved of his representation. Anastasia didn't want to lose such a talented person like Alan. Carl then wondered who Alan was, and Amy whispered something to him. He recalled that Alan was the commoner who was his classmate and guide in the ruins. Since Alan was going to participate in the duel, he asked Anastasia about her request. Anastasia just wanted to retract the insults thrown at her family and apologize. Alan then asked for Amy's request. Amy asked Anastasia to stay away from her, Carl, and the rest of her harem members. Carl mentioned there were 5 of them and suggested a one-on-one 5 times in a row. Alan scratched his head, telling them to come at him all at once since it was a hassle. Carl asked him not to joke around and suggested finding more people. Claude laughed, finding Alan interesting. Alan claimed he was not joking and wondered if they were all scared of him alone. The calm-looking Claude suddenly got angry. Anastasia tried to stop Alan, but he asked again if they all could take him on 5 versus 1. Claude was angry, but Marcus stopped him, saying they were not far behind compared to a skilled adventurer like Alan. He suggested backing off, but Alan started listing the other boys' negative traits, like Marcus losing to a commoner in studies, Oscar being popular not because of his face but because of his family prestige and money, and Leo only enjoying his time with women and threatening them. Alan exclaimed that it was still favorable for him even if there were 5 of them as his opponents. Anastasia didn't understand why Alan kept provoking them. Amy couldn't believe a background character acted as a substitute for the Villainess's daughter, deviating from the game. She saw Alan as an anomaly and assumed he was in love with Anastasia. Finding it disturbing, she couldn't fathom a commoner willing to die for the sake of love for a noble. Alan then asked Carl if they would accept his rules or run away. Carl, annoyed, warned him not to regret his decisions. Anastasia added another rule forbidding killing. Alan had forgotten about it and thanked her for including it. Oh boy, he was planning to kill 5 idiots from the start. Marcus thought it might look bad to the public, but still suggested accepting the rules. Carl agreed and declared himself as the witness. Suddenly, a nobleman raised his hand, offering to serve as the witness. Alan remembered him from the anti-Ramslet faction and found it unfair that the witness belonged to them. Carl announced they would start the duel immediately. Alan gave them 30 minutes to prepare, and Carl ordered him not to run away. Despite Alan appearing calm, Anastasia, Margaret, and Isabella were worried. Alan reassured them, claiming everything was fine, but Anastasia couldn't easily believe him. Alan was grateful for Anastasia having good friends beside her. Anastasia was at a loss for words. Margaret offered to handle things if an accident occurred during the duel, and Anastasia told Alan to resign as she didn't want to see his talent go to waste. Alan sighed and inquired if she had ever heard about the adventurer who became the youngest person to achieve rank C in the royal capital. The girls had heard it as a rumor, and Alan confirmed that it had been him all along. Anastasia was shocked, and Alan went on to list his titles, such as the youngest adventurer, member of the Goblin Labyrinth Explorers, Goblin Slayer, Orc Slayer, and Blizzard Phoenix Slayer. He concluded that the duel had been a sure win for him, but asked Anastasia to pretend to worry later. The girls saw him off, and Anastasia could only watch him leave. Meanwhile, Amy hadn't expected such a turn of events in the game. She thought Anastasia would just get beaten up. She believed Alan was just trying to impress the Villainess, but she was confident Carl wouldn't lose to him. Amy pictured Anastasia looking downcast at Alan's defeat and was pleased with the thought. She thanked Alan for the entertainment, knowing that as the game's heroine, the odds were in her favor. Shortly after, everyone became excited as they witnessed Alan's arrival. They were surprised to see he only had a dagger with him. Alan apologized for the delay, and Anastasia was particularly concerned about his choice of weapon. However, Alan unexpectedly knelt in front of her, pledging to secure victory for her. As the duel was about to begin, with the announcer signaling its start, Claude and Carl were already eager to engage. The duel commenced, and Carl and Claude rushed toward Alan. With a confident smile, Alan released a smokescreen that enveloped the training ground. Amy's boys had been flustered by the sudden smoke. Anastasia grew worried. Groaning sounds filled the air, piquing everyone's curiosity. As the smoke cleared, Leo, Oscar, and Claude were on the ground, with Alan standing among them. Margaret was shocked to see Carl and Marcus also down. Carl questioned what had just occurred. Alan seized Oscar, who pretended to be asleep, and pressed his dagger against his neck. He called for the referee, insisting that he admit defeat, or else he would stab Oscar and the referee would be held responsible. Flustered, the nobleman declared that Leo, Claude, and Oscar were out of the fight. The quick takedown surprised everyone, and Anastasia's worry lessened. Let's take a step back to a moment ago. Alan began by creating confusion using a smokescreen. While the others were bewildered, he used his gun and suppressors against Claude. The bullets he used were specially made to cause non-lethal injuries like breaking a bone or two. Alan kept releasing more smoke and approached the self-proclaimed magic genius. Marcus was in a state of panic, and Alan was relieved that Marcus hadn't cast any magic spells yet. Shifting focus to Leo, who was swinging his sword haphazardly, Alan needed to be cautious to avoid hitting innocent bystanders. He chose to clear the smoke around Leo and defeated him. Oscar, an archer without visibility, became helpless and was easily beaten. Among the chaos, Carl remained composed, showcasing his ability to cast powerful offensive magic. Despite the others acting spoiled, Alan treated Carl differently and struck him. Amy wondered what had happened because it was an unexpected situation. She knew the capture targets in the game were powerful, but she couldn't believe a random guy had beaten them down. Alan was ruining her dream world, and Anastasia was surprised, wondering what kind of person he was. With half of them knocked out, only Carl and Marcus remained, important figures in the game as the future king and prime minister. Alan asked them to surrender, but Marcus started threatening him and his family. Alan was impressed with Marcus using that card when he was on the verge of losing. He wondered if they were urging Alan to back off initially because they were afraid of losing to him. Alan pondered if Marcus's threat was towards the Ramslet family he represented. He asserted that Marcus should be clever enough to know who had the logic on their side, leading to the duel. Marcus claimed he was only protecting Amy, but Alan couldn't believe they were blaming Anastasia without proper evidence. He argued that it was Amy who provoked Anastasia first and got her hands dirty. While they spoke, nobody could hear their conversation, and Amy expected Marcus to defeat Alan with magic. Alan believed it would be proper for them to apologize to Anastasia and her family, calling them short-sighted despite being the future pillars of the country. He raised his hand, told them to reflect on their actions, and slapped Marcus. The referee announced Marcus was out of the fight, shocking everyone to see a commoner defeat 4 noblemen. Approaching Carl, who accused Alan of using suspicious magical gadgets, Alan told him to play fair. Amy claimed Alan played dirty and declared the duel invalid. Alan argued they didn't set such rules and pointed out Carl's cowardly actions for forcing Anastasia into a duel and insulting her in front of a crowd. Carl claimed it was because Anastasia did something dirty to Amy, but Alan asserted it was Amy who planted those rumors. As Alan tried to lecture the future king, Carl exclaimed that a commoner like Alan didn't know anything. He insisted he was forced to fulfill his role and no one ever tried to see the real him. He said only Amy understood him as if she had known him for a long time. In his mind, Alan agreed, acknowledging that Carl's character was predetermined when it was a game. Alan had pointed out that Anastasia was fulfilling her role as Carl's fiancée and had urged Carl to keep himself together for the sake of the country and its people. Carl couldn't believe that a future king was leaving one woman for another. He told Alan to shut up, stating that commoners like him wouldn't understand. According to Carl, the royals were there to protect and guide commoners, and unlike them, royals couldn't freely be with the one they loved. Carl exclaimed that he didn't choose to be born a royal. In response, Alan found him interesting and suggested eloping with Amy if he truly wanted to experience commoner life. Alan shared his own childhood experiences, recounting how he worked in the sewers with grueling labor. He described returning home to meager meals of wilted vegetables, a tiny piece of dried meat, and thin soup that barely covered the pan. Alan conveyed the hardships of sleeping on an empty stomach while yearning for satisfaction. He advised Carl not to act like a spoiled brat. The room fell into a deep silence as everyone absorbed Alan's words. Alan then told Carl that considering the well-being of the country and its people, choosing to stay with Anastasia would be the right choice. However, he added that it was too late now. Looking at Anastasia with a peaceful smile, Alan claimed that it was already his ending. Anastasia, filled with worry, noticed something behind Alan and urged him to look. Carl was casting a magic spell similar to the one that had gone wild during their class. Carl exclaimed that someone like Alan wouldn't handle his magic. He exclaimed his determination to protect Amy and unleashed his magical attack on Alan. Anastasia, feeling anxious, rushed to counter it with her ice magic. She feared that if things continued this way, everyone nearby would be consumed by the flames. The thought of witnessing Alan turning to ashes was unimaginable for her. Despite her concerns, Alan easily deflected the magical spell, casually dismissing it, and Carl too was sent flying away, crashing to the ground with a loud thud. Alan sighed as he deactivated his wind magic and summoned a witness. The witness examined Carl and declared him unconscious, declaring Alan as the winner of the duel. Margaret and Isabella were impressed by the outcome, while Anastasia could only gaze at Alan's retreating figure. Amy, taken aback by this unexpected turn, collapsed to the ground, realizing that everything was lost for her. She had proclaimed herself as the heroine of this world, convinced that her choices were always right. Alan had knelt in front of Anastasia and dedicated his victory to her. Flustered, Anastasia thanked him and tried to express her worries for Carl. Alan claimed Carl had just exhausted his mana and his life was not threatened. Anastasia was glad that Alan hadn't killed anyone. Alan was impressed that even in this situation, Anastasia was still thinking about the country and its people. Alan then excused himself, thanking her, alongside Margaret and Isabella. After that, Alan left, and Anastasia tried to call out to him. However, the witness reminded her about the final confirmation of the duel. She recalled she was the one who initiated the duel and felt responsible to clean things up. However, she was still worried about Alan. Afterwards, Anastasia ran hard as she recalled Alan's words that sounded like he would be gone forever. She then barged into Alan's dorm room and found nothing. Everything was all cleaned up. A maid then noticed her, and Anastasia asked for Alan's whereabouts. The maid claimed that Alan had requested a long time ago to clean the room as it was empty. Anastasia blanked out after learning that Alan had left for good. Meanwhile, Alan walked back home with his belongings. He did his best but lost the duel. Unfortunately, the nobles wouldn't leave him alone. He provoked them and used harsh words, hoping for a pardon to avoid execution. When he returned home, Katerina was surprised to see him with a lot of stuff. Curious about what happened, she encouraged Alan to share the details. Despite hesitating, Alan eventually opened up to Katerina that night. He explained how he supported a duke's unfairly treated daughter and might be expelled as a consequence. Understanding Katerina's desire for him to graduate and secure a well-paid job, Alan apologized to his mother. Surprisingly, Katerina was supportive and proud to see Alan stand up for a girl facing difficulties. He revealed the involvement of the crown prince and another country's prince, thinking that dropping out of school wasn't enough as punishment. Katerina, concerned for her son's safety, suggested he run away while she faced the consequences on his behalf. Despite Alan insisting on taking responsibility, Katerina prioritized his well-being and asked him to go to bed since it was already late. Alan thought about what had gone wrong as he lay on his bed. He questioned whether he could save his mother if anything happened in the future. The worry of not being able to protect her and others consumed him. Suddenly, the attic door opened and his mother entered. Katerina shared her fear of the ladder but was amazed by the view of the castle from the attic. She wondered when was the last time she saw Alan on his bed, stating that he was not a baby anymore. Curious about Alan's brilliance, she speculated that it might be because he was his father's son, even though Alan's father had died before he was born, and the reason was never disclosed to him. Alan felt regretful for involving his mother in the mess. Impressed by Alan's actions, Katerina praised him for helping a girl in trouble and resembling his father. She believed that Alan's father would be proud. Alan, however, questioned this as he knew nothing about his father. Katerina expressed her readiness to fight anyone to protect her son. Despite Alan apologizing for troubling her, Katerina insisted she was proud of him. As Alan became more emotional, Katerina suddenly felt sleepy and sat down on his bed asking him to move. Although Alan reminded her that she had her own room, Katerina explained that she was scared to climb down the ladder. The next morning, Alan woke up feeling better after a night of negative thoughts. He had worried about being executed or something like that, but now he was just nervous from overthinking. Glad to be back home, he sat down for breakfast with his mother, wondering how long this calm feeling would stick around. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Katerina wondered who it could be, and Alan, thinking it might be someone from the royal palace, went to answer it. Surprisingly, there was no one there. Out of nowhere, Monica, who had been hiding behind the door, playfully jumped on Alan, getting caught between his arms. She greeted Katerina with enthusiasm, mentioning that she had come over from the guild with fresh vegetables. Monica also informed Alan that the usual group was waiting downstairs. In that moment, a wave of nostalgia hit Alan. Outside, he met his seniors who were wondering why Alan had returned. Jared assumed that Alan had been kicked out of the dorms and brought back a girl. Monica argued that Alan wasn't like that. The seniors then told him to visit the guild. Alan wondered if the news had not spread yet. Katerina wondered why Alan hadn't shared what happened. Alan claimed he didn't want the guild involved. Suddenly, they noticed an incoming carriage, an unusual sight in the morning. Alan assumed they were from the royal palace to arrest him. However, he noticed no emblem on the carriage. A butler emerged and greeted Alan. He was from the Ramslet family, there to pick him up. Alan suddenly realized it was Anastasia. Alan was confused, so the butler explained that Gerhard Ramslet, the head of the Ramslet Duke family, had asked to meet him. Katerina, Alan's mother, stepped forward to protect her son, but the butler reassured her that Alan, their young lady's benefactor, would not be harmed. Alan assured his mother that everything would be fine. Katerina then instructed him to change his clothes, and Alan asked the butler to wait for a moment. Shortly after, the carriage departed with Alan wearing his school uniform. Looking out the window, he realized it was his first time in the aristocratic district, where every mansion looked amazing. They reached the Ramslet residence quickly, and the butler told Alan to wait in a room. A maid offered him a cup of tea, and Alan was impressed by the obvious wealth and power of the Duke family. He noticed his hands were shaking and tried to calm himself down. His goal was to gain as much cooperation as possible from the Ramslet family. At that moment, Gerhard Ramslet walked into the room, catching Alan off guard. With a sense of dignity, Gerhard greeted Alan, who responded respectfully. Gerhard gestured for Alan to sit and then formally introduced himself, apologizing for the sudden summons. Alan assured him it was no trouble. Gerhard then expressed gratitude for Alan's assistance to his daughter, Anastasia, against the Crown Prince and Prince Claude. He thanked Alan for fighting on Anastasia's behalf. Alan, feeling flustered, found it surprising to see a duke bowing to him. Gerhard proceeded to ask some questions, and Alan was okay with that. Gerhard started by apologizing for checking into Alan's background, particularly his achievements as an adventurer. He had heard about Alan soloing a Blizzard Phoenix, skipping grades in a commercial school, and saving money to attend high school. Gerhard was curious why someone with Alan's accomplishments would engage in a seemingly foolish duel, fully aware of the likely outcome. He assumed Alan had some interest in his daughter. Alan had claimed that he was ready to face expulsion, stating that he had assisted Anastasia because he admired her dedication and hard work. Recognizing the difference in their social standings, he explained to Gerhard why he sacrificed the opportunity to attend the high school he had long prepared for. Alan confided in Gerhard that his motivation was to protect his mother and those who had cared for him. Perplexed, Gerhard questioned Alan's decision, considering it a waste of his efforts to enter the high school. In response, Alan revealed that he only wanted to safeguard his mother and the people in his life. Gerhard found the reason for the duel absurd, but Alan insisted it was still a duel. He argued that if Anastasia had fought, she could harm the crown prince, leading to her inevitable defeat. Understanding Alan's point, Gerhard acknowledged that Anastasia would be expelled from the school as per the other party's request to keep her away from the crown prince and others. Alan elaborated that this unilateral removal of a duke's daughter would set a precedent, causing chaos among other nobles who might fear being easily cast aside by the royals. He predicted that it could escalate into violence, affecting the entire kingdom. Impressed by Alan's foresight, Gerhard offered to take responsibility for Alan's case and ensure his mother's safety. Alan expressed gratitude, and Gerhard assured him that the Duke of Ramslet had his back, encouraging Alan to reach out anytime. Relieved, Alan thanked Gerhard, who instructed the butler to escort Alan safely home. After Alan left, Gerhard pondered on what kind of man Alan would become after defeating 5 nobles with divine protections. Reflecting on the chaos at the school, he realized that Anastasia's earlier warning about the situation was indeed accurate. The night before, Anastasia rushed in to see her father. Sweating and out of breath, she had something important to share. After she explained, Gerhard concluded that Karl had lived up to his expected level of foolishness. Gerhard then wondered how Anastasia managed to defeat the 5 strongest students in school. Anastasia then shared details about Alan, a commoner who attended the school on a scholarship. She praised Alan for being an impressive adventurer, skilled in magic, friendly, and excelling in studies. Gerhard started to wonder if Anastasia had feelings for Alan. Anastasia blushed and scolded her father. Gerhard apologized for assuming, realizing that Anastasia spoke with great enthusiasm about Alan. He also began to realize that maintaining the engagement with the crown prince would be challenging for his daughter. Gerhard asked Sebas for information about Alan, and he began his report. Anastasia was impressed with the investigation on Alan. After reviewing the report, Gerhard agreed that Alan was truly exceptional. Anastasia insisted that Alan was someone the country couldn't afford to lose. Since it was already late at night, Gerhard told her to get some rest. However, Anastasia couldn't shake off her concerns for Alan. Back in the past, Gerhard realized that his daughter's situation was serious. Just then, Anastasia entered the room and agreed with his concerns. Gerhard mentioned that Alan matched her description. Anastasia felt guilty for involving Alan, knowing it might lead to a war. She expressed shame about her situation with the crown prince, and her mother comforted her with a hug. Gerhard decided to go to the royal palace to confirm with his daughter if she wanted to protect Alan as the head of the dukedom. Anastasia tearfully agreed. Outside, Alan rode in a carriage inquiring about Anastasia's whereabouts. Sebas informed him that Anastasia couldn't meet anyone at the moment. As Alan left the dukedom, he wore a saddened expression, assuming that Anastasia already hated him for disappearing without explanation. Despite this, he was grateful to have changed his fate and survived. A few days later, Katerina called Alan to his room and explained that someone wanted to meet him. Sebas greeted him and delivered an invitation from Gerhard for dinner the next day. Alan was surprised at the prospect of meeting Anastasia again. The following day, Alan and Katerina, both concerned about their outfits, waited in the familiar reception room at the Ramslet Duke House. Alan assured Katerina not to worry about dressing formally since Sebas had informed them otherwise. Katerina noticed that Alan didn't seem concerned, as his school uniform looked formal enough. Understanding the rarity of a commoner being invited to a duke's dinner, Alan empathized with his mother's unease. Suddenly, Gerhard entered the room in casual attire, questioning if Katerina was his mother. Katerina introduced herself, expressing gratitude for the invitation. Gerhard, in turn, introduced himself and formally thanked Katerina for Alan's help in saving his daughter. He then introduced his wife Elizabeth and son Friedrich. Alan greeted them, and Elizabeth urged him to skip formalities, considering him her daughter's benefactor. She called out for Elizabeth, and to everyone's confusion, the Villainess appeared, pouting. She shot a glare at Alan and whisked him away, leaving the others bewildered. Outside the room, Anastasia cornered Alan against the wall, expressing her concern about his sudden disappearance from the dorms. Alan wondered if she was upset. He apologized, assuring her he was happy to see her again. Anastasia admitted feeling the same and thanked him for fighting in the duel for her. Relieved that he wasn't disliked, Alan smiled. However, Anastasia glared at him and questioned his laughter. Elizabeth was pleased that the two were close. Anastasia and Alan then went back inside the room. Elizabeth informed Alan that Anastasia had been worried about him, even revealing that she ran to her father crying to seek help. A bit embarrassed, Anastasia denied crying. Elizabeth suggested Alan call Anastasia by the nickname Anna. "All right, everyone, from now on we'll be calling her Anna." Elizabeth then wondered about Alan's feelings. When Alan asked Anna if he could use her nickname, she agreed, but only when they were alone. To mask her embarrassment, she instructed Sebas to prepare the dining hall. Observing the relaxed atmosphere, Alan decided to express emotions more fitting for his age rather than maintaining his usual poker face. Everyone then sat down at the dining table, and Gerhard mentioned that he had invited Alan to share the details of the recent incident. For the upcoming school term's opening ceremony, it was decided that the Crown Prince and Amy would apologize to Anna for the duel. Gerhard thought it made sense to make the apology in front of those who witnessed the incident. He also disclosed that the engagement between Karl and Anna had been officially cancelled. Since Anna seemed to like Alan, Gerhard asked him to continue being friends with her, although his words carried more significance. However, Alan interpreted it merely as a friendship between a commoner and a noble. In the end, Gerhard reported that Alan wouldn't face punishment or expulsion from school, leaving Alan and Katerina relieved. Gerhard even offered Alan a job in the dukedom after graduation or the chance to be introduced to someone. He advised Alan to enjoy his school life first. This news brought tears of happiness to Katerina, who thanked Gerhard. As another motherly figure, Elizabeth was pleased for Katerina and had Sebastian help her wipe away tears. Anna then asked Alan to take care of her in the next term, and Alan made the same request. Gerhard announced that it was time to eat, and everyone enjoyed the delicious food along with light and casual conversations. Alan was pleased that everything had worked out well. Afterwards, before they left, Alan and Katerina expressed their gratitude to the Duke family for the invitation. Anna then approached Alan for a conversation, and Elizabeth opted to take Katerina for a stroll around the garden first. Anna, later on, asked Alan to lead her and Margaret to explore a labyrinth. Not knowing it was the Great Orc Labyrinth, Alan inquired how deep they wanted to go. Anna, puzzled by his question since the labyrinth had been recently discovered, realized Alan's mistake. He had explored it before it became known to others. Anna pointed out that the labyrinth's depth was still unknown and questioned why Alan referred to it as the Great Labyrinth. She then deduced that Alan had already thoroughly explored it, and Alan had no choice but to confirm it. He mentioned there was only an Orc King as the boss and no traps were present. Anna agreed that explorers often choose not to report their discoveries. Alan then revealed he had memorized the labyrinth's layout by completing it repeatedly using the fast lapse method. Anna, uneasy at the thought of the rigorous method, questioned Alan's actions. He, unaware of her discomfort, asked if something was wrong. Anna, with a smile, attempted to share her thoughts about Alan but left it unfinished. She requested him to guide her and Alan agreed, noting it would be after the new year started. Shortly after, the two rode in a carriage for days towards Altmund, where Margaret awaited them. She had heard from the guild that many people had already explored the labyrinth. Alan suggested that there might be adventurers who had already cleared it, but Margaret insisted they still had a chance considering they had the strongest individuals from their school. Although Margaret expressed interest in scouting Alan for the Altmund family, she assured Anna that she had no intention of taking away Anna's precious knight. Margaret even jokingly mentioned offering all the treasures in exchange for Alan, but Alan couldn't bring himself to reveal that he had already collected everything. Suddenly, the knights from the Altmund family began to doubt Alan's capabilities as their guide. They found it hard to believe that a mere student could conquer the Goblin Labyrinth and earn the title of Orc Slayer. In response, they questioned Alan about his plans and he wondered if he could assess their skills first. The guards, however, acted arrogantly and insisted that Alan leave Margaret's protection to them. Everyone had entered the Orc Labyrinth, and Alan instructed them to engage in a battle so he could assess his skills. The guards mocked him, revealing their lack of trust. Margaret pointed out something ahead and they discovered Inosuke's kin. A guard volunteered to attack first, but Alan intervened, insisting on going first. He brandished his gun, eager to demonstrate its power. Loading the gun, he kept the guards in suspense about his weapon. Anna warned of an approaching orc, but the fight ended swiftly when Alan fired a shot, taking down the orc instantly. The guards were left speechless. Alan, relieved, explained that he had applied wind magic to his tool that fired iron bullets. The girls, impressed by the destructive weapon, relied on him. Alan urged them to move forward, and this time the guards heeded his command. Witnessing his skill, they were grateful they hadn't antagonized Alan. Just then, another orc appeared, and Anna stepped forward. She fired ice magic like using a bow and arrow to catch the orc off guard. She unsheathed her sword and slashed the orc's neck. With a proud expression, Anna wondered who Alan would protect. Alan was surprised to see the knight's blessing in action. The exploration continued with Alan leading the group, and the knights watched out for sneak attacks from behind. In the end, they quickly defeated the Orc King and its companions. The guards were surprised to see the Orc King, priests, and mages defeated so easily. Alan then explained how to exit the labyrinth by entering the room next to the boss room. Margaret thanked Alan for being their guide, but Anna was thinking about something else. Alan told them to touch the labyrinth core, and as they left, they noticed that there were no treasures anymore. Suddenly, Anna asked Alan for fast laps. She claimed she wanted to do it with Alan and said she wouldn't fall behind. She told him not to get overconfident, and Alan apologized. After that, Alan and Anna continued completing laps until they managed to level up. That is the end of the manga recap for now. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.